6:33 p.m. Here's clear good. All right. But pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 18, in the Governor's March 15, 2020 order, imposing strict limitation on the number of people that may gather in one place, this meeting of the Southborough Advisory Committee will be conducted via remote participation to the greatest extent possible. Specific information in the general guidelines for remote participation by members of the public and/or parties with a right and/or requirement to attend this meeting can be found on the Town of Southborough's website at www.southboroughma.com. For this meeting, members of the public who wish to watch or participate in the meeting may do so in the following manner by finding the meeting at www.southboroughma.com/remote meetings. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings in real time via technological means. In the event that we are unable to do so, despite best efforts, we will post on Southborough's website an audio or video recording, transcript, or other comprehensive record of proceedings as soon as possible after the meeting. All right.
Hey, Kathy,
So,
can you hear me?
I can hear you, John.
Thank you, Jason.
Welcome.
So now, John, what does your time look like at this point?
Yeah, the sooner that we can get to the item of facilities, the better, Kathy. It's kind of up in the air right now as to where I'll be in the next, say, hour or so. So any ability to advance that would be great.
Okay, so I am going to advance that to what we're going to talk about first. John Parent also has he needs to finish as soon as possible too. So Jason, can you bring John Parent in as soon as he's there?
You're just FYI, Kathy, you're breaking up a lot, but John Parent is in.
So I don't know what to do about that. I'm sitting in my office with.
Sounds good now.
That's much better.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, John. All right, so are you with us? There you are. Okay. So John, Mr. Mooney, your liaison, also has a time constraint. So we're going to start right with your budget. John, do you want to introduce his budget? Do you want to start off or you want John to start off?
Well, basically, we can just say that we'll start with the operating budget. And the way it was comprised this year is we took an actual 3-year expenditure average, and we worked off of that to try to bring it back more into line where it realistically, after the cuts last year, theoretically should be. I understand the budgetary situation. I just want to present it in a manner that reflects the actual expenses as we normally would see them.
Okay, now I'm going to screen share your budget.
Okay.
And it is under general government.
FYI, I'm moving Judy in.
Okay, so now, Jason, the message I'm getting is the host disabled participant screen sharing.
That should fix it.
Looks like it did.
While we're waiting, Kathy, I can tell the rest of the committee that John and I spoke on a number of occasions. We went over his budget line by line, and John, like every other department head of this town, understands the budget situation. And I think, for those of us who have gotten to know the department heads in this town, it's an incredible group of people that Mark and the Board of Selectmen have collected to run this town. I think it's easier for John. It'd be certainly easier for the committee for John to just go item by item. And perhaps if you have questions on each item, it might be easier and make this flow a little bit smoother.
Okay, so let's remind everybody, John, that John Parent is in charge of basically two budgets, related, but two separate ones. What we call other operation support. So if you guys can see where my cursor is, there's that one that's going to have his salary and everything else in it other than what's in, excuse me, I'm doing the opposite. Other operation support is utilities. So phone, internet, electricity, et cetera, is in that one. And then public buildings and property is where his salary and everybody else is located. And just to remind everybody that at town meeting, you may recall that the one amendment to the budget that was approved was to this department, where Mr. Hamilton proposed amending the budget and reducing it by $50,000, and it was supported. So John, I definitely want you to speak to that tonight before we go, as far
Absolutely.
as how things look year to date, given you to have $50,000 whacked out of that without much discussion.
Yeah, Kathy, he's prepared. He's prepared to address that.
Okay, so now I'm going to let me just move this over. Okay, so again, just watch my cursor here. All right, John, which one do you want to start with?
You want to start with operations? That's where we usually start.
Okay.
Might as well stick with the status quo.
So remember, everybody, as we get used to ClearGov, you just keep hitting where you see plus signs. Every time you hit a plus sign, you can get more details. So here we are. Okay, so everybody see my cursor. Here's your detail of the $410,000 proposed budget for all the town's various utilities. Okay. And then one more thing before John, you pick this back up. If you follow my cursor, John has inserted a lot of explanations against each line item. You see, when it's green, there's something there. So there's a lot of green over here to the right next to his line item. So he has made a comment on most every line item.
Yeah, and Kathy, we did that intentionally in an effort to make sure that everyone had as much information primarily before the meeting as opposed to having to read it real time.
Okay. All right, back to you, John.
All right, so basically what we did with 22, energy, to use 21 as an indicator is unrealistic. Due to COVID right now and the buildings being shut down for periods of time and basically having to leave windows open even when the heat's on at times to bring in fresh air, it wouldn't be realistic to use 21 in this equation at all. Actual 21s. That being the case, 90% of the line items that we've held basically at the same level they were budgeted for 21. Now, the only caveat I would make to that is I also left the oil at the rate we're paying, which we have an exceptional rate. We're paying $1.45 a gallon, which is wonderful. Given, the COVID situation, even though it will be resolving by the time we come back up to contract, I don't feel oil is going to fluctuate that drastically over the next 6 months. I just can't see that happening. I don't see the country all of a sudden recovering 100% overnight. So there may be a little increase necessary on the oil. We can revisit that a little bit later date when we look at the public safety complex again. And that basically takes us to public safety complex. Kathy had already made mention to the cut that was voted at town meeting. And right now, the trajectory shows we're going to probably fall in the ballpark about 20,000 short on public safety. That's heat and electricity based off the most recent 12 months. If all things remain the same, could be a little worse if we have a bad winter because last winter was relatively mild. So if we get a real humdinger of a winter, that 20 could become 25. Only time will tell. We are still early in the fiscal year, relatively speaking, when you're talking heat. But I do feel the numbers I presented for next year, that's going to bring us pretty close based on this 12-year mark. But as I mentioned in the notes, we should probably look at this prior to town meeting again, so we don't run into a similar situation on the floor. Because there seem to be a lot of questions on it, and we want to make sure we're covered enough but we don't want to go overboard either.
Okay, I'm going to again ask people to ask questions in the order I can see you. So Jason?
I mean, I was pretty opinionated on this particular issue last year at town meeting. I agree with John Parent's approach, though. I think this is the right budget to hold, the right approach to do for now. And I think before we press final on a budget, John should come back and at least educate us on, you know, whether he still thinks it holds true or not. I do think when we look at energy prices right now, we're probably pretty close to an all-time low. So unfortunately, there probably is, you know, anything but north headed up. My only question, John, for you was the wireless phone communications. I actually, unless I missed it, I didn't see a note next to that one, and it was going up somewhat materially. And I would think in the age of competition in that industry, that number would actually go down over time, unless you're adding a slew of phone services that weren't previously budgeted. So I don't know if you had any comments on that or thoughts.
It's not adding a slew, but in that budget outside of phones, you know, if people need an iPad or equipment for the phones, chargers, cases, these are the things that do add up with time. And as for competition, we are with Verizon Wireless, which has really good rates and exceptional service. And the service is a necessity for the town. We don't want to be in a situation where we don't have service.
So on that, like, who approves who gets what device? Obviously, like I know on the fire side, when I hear from Chief Achilles, he actually has like a phone allowance in there because it's a union contract. But like, who are these phones covering? What's the protocol? Like, are you seeing some people have two devices on a phone plan, like an iPad and a cell phone?
No, not to my knowledge. Not the same person would have two things. Generally, if a new person needs to add a phone, like Mark will call me and ask me, you know, can you get a phone for this person? And we do it. You know, Mark basically tells us when someone should be added. And if we have to add someone, you know, that someone asked us, we'd clear it with Mark first.
But is there a formal policy as far as who gets cell phones?
Generally, anyone who would be on call or is deemed necessary for their job. If we have someone that has to text a lot back and forth, it's a necessity. You know, it's either they need a phone. We can't make them use their personal phone.
Do we know how many users we have or how many even employees we have in general?
I could have Sue get that number for you, the total number of phones.
Yeah, I think it would just be good to know on the per unit cost kind of thing.
Okay.
Yeah, I think, Kathy, that's my only real question here, but I would say the follow-up I would like to see from John is similar to what Andrew just said, is just some more details around that, and just so we can offer a final thought on that.
All right,
That's
let
easy.
me, go ahead,
That's an
John.
easy one.
So let me insert something that may help. I got rid of, see this X right here? There's another column I could put back in that you'd see on yours if you don't have it X'd out that means nothing. It says October 2022 or 10/9/22. You should get rid of that one. It means nothing. So it will help you keep the screen a little bit cleaner. And you'll also see that for fiscal year 21 budgeted, it's all lumped into a few numbers up here. And then for fiscal year 22, he's got it spread out really nicely by building, by type of utility, et cetera. So you got a lot more information in fiscal year 22. And one thing that Jason and I questioned last year that I imagine Jason now has the answer to too, but I didn't. Neither one of us could understand why the DPW electricity was so high. We were thinking, is that the hopper, whatever, but that's your street lights that are in that. That's why that one is so big, because it's running through that. If anybody has that question. Okay, so who's next? Andrew Pfaff, do you have any further questions?
Let me see. Library electricity seems like it went from 16.2 to 21 between 20 and 22. Just seems like a pretty good jump. Did we add something there that's drawing a lot of power?
Well, you're 2 years owed there too, Andrew. So
Yeah, that's 2 years, Andrew.
Yeah. But I'm saying, you know, most of the other ones are pretty much make sense, you know.
It was actually based on an actual, and we have replaced the VFDs. We just actually did the second one the other day. So I'm hopeful that will come down, but until I see again a 12-month history,
Yeah.
I'm not comfortable taking it out until I actually have actual history behind us.
It could be like we added those sump pumps or the dehumidifiers or something like that, right?
Yeah, over there it could always be something like that over there, unfortunately.
Exactly. That's just my thought there. And then the other one was on the police and fire. If I look at I'm just kind of looking at 20 versus 22 because, as you said, 21 is hard to look at. It seems like the numbers aren't too far off to what you had there.
Are you actually looking at police and fire, or are you looking at area 015? Because it should fall under public safety now.
So I'm
Yes.
looking at the fiscal year 20
Yeah.
for police and fire, which was, I mean, obviously it's a different building, but I'm just saying like the incremental isn't that much. I know we talked about town meeting, we can cover that later, but it doesn't look like the incremental is that much difference for that bigger of a building.
Yeah, we kept that very tight under the assumption that the new building was going to be coming. I'm pretty confident with the numbers at public safety this year. It feels a lot better to have a 12-month history behind you, let me tell you.
Yeah.
You need history over in that building.
Yeah, and I think that's
So it's 85 from 2 years ago from the old building to 99 now. So
Correct.
that's true. That sounds pretty good given the difference in size.
given how much, isn't it almost twice as large? That's what
Yes.
Jason knows.
Yes,
Yes.
it's almost
But didn't
exactly
you say
double.
you're still worried about fiscal year 21 being short $20,000?
Yeah, the trajectory, because for 21 heating, we had 12,278. And in 22, it's estimated at 20,334. And electricity, we had 69,000 for 21, and it's 79 for 22. And the 22s are based off of 12-month actual histories. Again, we after the town meeting, I just had to make cuts. So we just adjusted. Without that history, there wasn't much we could do.
So are you saying you're worried about fiscal year 21, but you
Yep.
think you've got it right for fiscal year 22?
So far, we look like we're pretty much on course for 22. Like I said, I'm a little nervous about the oil, and that's not for public safety. That's just oil in general. But when we revisit, we can revisit that topic. And I don't think oil will be greatly short if it's short. I'm not looking at $10,000, $20,000.
Okay, so
But,
I'm being,
I just don't like to come up short on you guys.
Yeah.
right, so you got to say this again. What you said it's not clear. Because we're not into fiscal year 22 yet. Are you saying that you think your projected budget for fiscal year 22 is okay, even though you think your fiscal year 21 budget that got reduced at town meeting, it looks like you're going to be short by the time we get to June 30th?
You got it.
Okay.
Yep, because I increased 22 from the 21 to reflect the 12-month history.
Okay,
And again, once I get through this winter, we're going to move that 12 months out like another 3 or 4 months now, because I really want to capture a true New England winter. Last year was not a good representation of what New England winters are.
So John, just to clarify, the numbers you have in here for heat and electricity are based on like a rolling 12 months, right?
Yes, right now, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect.
And I think the ability to come back before us, before going to March town meeting, we'll certainly have a better look on where things stand in 21. Kathy?
I agree, John. Plus, I think it's extremely unrealistic that we're going to have a town meeting in March. I think we're talking May or June, so we'll have more time to look at this probably, if you had to bet. Andrew, anything else?
That's it for me.
Mr. Martell?
Good evening. Just wondering, in a general sense, to maybe I should already know this. To what degree is the town using voice over IP?
That would actually be a question for the IT department. I believe the main phone system is that.
Okay, great. That's it.
Mr. Maroney, do you want to ask any further questions?
I asked my questions over the last number of weeks, Kathy. I think I'm good.
Okay, so everybody thinks, he said he's good, right? I had trouble understanding that. I think he did. Andrew Dennington,
I don't have any questions.
Judy? Judy, you're muted. So Judy, I'm going to move on. If you want to ask a question, unmute yourself. Okay. All right, so I just got oh, okay, there you are. So Judy, do you have any questions?
No questions, no.
All right, so I just want to make sure everybody understands that, let's see. All right, that's okay. My questions are going to be for the next one, so I'm okay with this one. So everybody's okay with utilities? All right, now let's go to the other budget that John is in charge of, and that's the one called Public Buildings and Properties. So I'm going to click on that one now. Okay, so everybody see where my cursor is? So this one is proposed to increase by 6.33% from fiscal year 21 approved. Okay, so John, you want to take this one?
Again, this was based off 3-year averages of actual expenditures from 18 to 20. I do think we're going to be probably in a similar situation, you know, next year as I am this year with the energy. We probably shouldn't look at 21 too closely next year, where it was a reduced budget. So we'll be looking at these 3 years for a while, probably. And what I did is I presented the budget in a manner that reflects an average of where those 3 more realistic years of operation were at. Again, I understand the budgetary situation, but I at least wanted to present it up front to where I feel realistically it's where it should be budgeted.
Okay, so I hope that sunk in what he said. Everybody will recall that last year, because we were trying to get the budget down further, we went through an exercise at the very end where various departments were asked to reduce their previously approved budget by more, what we call the 2% exercise. John's department was one of those, so he did reduce his budget as requested. So what he's done for fiscal year 22 is he has basically, for lack of a better word, ignored those cuts and looked at what that budget looked like before those cuts, and basically taken an average of 3 years to come up with many of the numbers he's had here. So if every department does what he's done, we're probably going to even have a bigger problem than we already have, because if we start off with a base that does not reflect those 2% cuts, we've already started off with a 3 or 4% increase before we get to just normal increases. So I just want to make sure everybody understands what he did to get to the proposed numbers for fiscal year 22. And if you read his comments out here, he's going to tell you that's how he did. He'll tell you how he got to each one of those numbers if you read his comments over here.
Kathy, could you run through that again? Where he should start?
Yeah, so Judy, last year, remember we went through an exercise at the very end where departments, because of COVID, et cetera, were asked to reduce their expense projected budgets, or budgets that had been approved by a number that would get us down to a projected 2% year-over-year tax increase. They were also asked to do a 0%, but it's 2% that we used. So John Parent did do that as he was asked. And so he ended up reducing his approved budget by an amount of money. To come up with fiscal year 22, he's basically restoring those cuts to basically project fiscal year 22 as far as what he thinks he needs to operate. So if we do that with every single department that got cut, we're already going to start off with a pretty big year-over-year increase just because of that fact. So rather than starting with the actual approved budget last year and building on that, we're going back to the budget that was approved before that set of budget cuts were enacted.
Okay.
Okay. Now,
And again, I know there's going to be adjustments to it, but for an initial budget, I always want to give you guys what I believe is the most realistic scenario for the properties we have and what we've historically had to do with them. Again, luckily, we do have the capital maintenance article if we have to do reductions here and there, so we could lean on that a little if we had to. but I do think it's important that you see up front what the averages really have been in those buildings.
Okay, now, everybody follow my cursor. When you see his salary line go up exactly 2.5%, all he's done is taken the recommended COLA increase that all the town employees were told to use to get to that line item. So there's no new people in there, no new hours. That's simply the people from last year with their salaries adjusted by 2.5%. Okay. All right, Jason. Here's Jason.
John, what's the public safety building contracted services?
Contracted services for public safety, that's going to cover a lot of HVAC stuff. Basically, anything we have to do for repairs and maintenance in that building, we're going to bring in outside vendors through the years. Like this year, we've already brought in the plumber a couple times. Now the warranty's over. I'm expecting that we're gonna be doing some tweaking as we go along. That's one of those numbers. I think it's going to be a safe number covering the certain HVAC we have to bring in. I'm not going to say it's heavily cushioned because I don't feel it is. Realistically, like just Jason, as you and I discussed in the server room, I had to do a little bit of tweaking of some drain pipes, and that was a couple $1,000s alone right there. So over the next year, I think it's a number we can work with, but realistically, now that the warranty period's over, now I need a 12-month history out of warranty to know for certain. That's where this gets a little tricky again. This first couple of years of a shakedown it's very unknown. I wish I had a crystal ball on this one.
John, do we have any sense of what the warranty costs were when they existed?
They were the warranty that came with the building, actually, John, and most of the stuff.
Yeah, I'm just wondering what that number is if we had to get outside contractors in during that period of time. Jason, do you know?
They were there constantly for a year. I'm sure John and the Chiefs can speak to that, but it was a big number.
I'm expecting
John.
Christmas cards from some of these people at this point. One actually texted me today to let me know he's going into surgery. On the bright side, things do seem to be coming under control. We're still tweaking some things, but realistically, with a building this size, it's a complex building. And when you have as many individual mechanical components are in this building and electronic, some of them, and it's not going to be any fault of the building, but when you make 1,000 widgets and you're installing them in a building instead of 3, you got a much better chance that a few of them are going to be bad. And unfortunately, it generally happens after the warranty period.
So I don't think we answered Mr. Mooney's question. Jason, I thought what John was asking, weren't a lot of the warranties that were now, weren't they part of what we bought? In other words, there wasn't a cost to the warranty for the first.
Yeah, it was zero, but I think John's question is, what would it have been? That's at least how I interpreted it.
Okay.
Yeah, that's
John, if you
what,
want to clarify.
Yeah, I did that. That was the reason for my question, to try to predict moving forward.
In the first year, John, honestly, just the HVAC alone would far surpass what we have budgeted. The first year of HVAC was a lot of shakedown. Jason's very familiar with what I've been working with in the last year over there with that. Again, it's coming under control. I am going to take out a warranty policy on the some of the energy management system over there. Very complex. We've been leaning on them a lot. And for a couple $1,000s, it's a very good investment. We'll be spending a lot more if I don't take that out, unfortunately.
So there's a policy that you can take out specifically for this building that would cover various types of outside contractor work?
Yes. Like if you were to take let's just take the heating and air conditioning, John. When a building gets older, a lot of times you will take a maintenance policy. But where the building is newer now, it's usually more advantageous to do it on time and materials. And that's what I plan to do for the first couple years. As a building does get older and parts start to wear naturally from age, a maintenance policy is usually a better deal. I checked with quite a few HVAC people this year on this. So I'd go T&M for the first year or two.
Kathy, I guess a point that I don't expect John Parent to answer, but I think advisory needs to add to a future agenda, is there's a significant amount of contracted services for this building and other buildings in department budgets, but this building in particular. And I think we need to work with Mark and Brian to create at least consistency of where that stuff should go. So for example, the security cameras for that building, there's a whole maintenance agreement that goes along with it. As you can imagine, there's a lot of them in that building. It's split between the police and fire budget. So if you go to the fire budget, you only see half of it. You go to the police budget, you only see half of it. It's really a facility related cost. It's not a department related cost. So we're not going to solve it tonight. I'm not advocating we discuss it tonight, but I think we need to add it to, it's just going to be geography of where it goes, but I think it will help in terms of managing where these costs sit moving forward and get it consistent. So it's not split up in 5 different spots.
Okay. Jason, any more specific questions on this?
I'm
Budget.
good. Thank you.
Mr. Martell?
I don't have any questions on this one.
Judy?
No questions.
I'm going to skip John, assuming he has his questions already answered. Andrew Pfaff, Andrew P.
I think, John, my only question is I know you basically took the 3-year actual look back, but it looks like for, especially on the contracted services in some areas, that 2020 was historically low, you know, especially like looking at like library contracted services, you know, with 14,000, 18,000, then 3,700. Do we have an idea of what that's like for FY21?
You're only halfway through the year, so again, it would be a lot of guessing still at that point, Andrew. You do get outlying years. That's one thing. Every now and then you'll get a weird outlier year that there was one of them here. I did adjust, and I got to remember which building it was. If I look too quick, I might be able to find it. It had one year that was really high, so I had to pull that year out and guess in between. Yeah. Because if I get a super high year, I can't in good conscience throw that into an average for you guys and then work off that. That's not right.
I think it was the townhouse one for the FY19.
Yeah, I mean, we are looking to budget enough to keep our buildings going. You know, we want to make sure it's accurate, and I want you guys to have stuff that's realistic. But there are outlying years. It does happen.
Yep. And just so I understand, the contracted services across the various buildings is just, you know, random if you need plumbers or electricians, or is this the cleaning? Is this, you know, what's included in this bucket?
Generally, when we do building maintenance, that stuff we do in-house, that would be materials. And if it's something we hire out, that falls under contracted services.
So I'm trying to answer questions with my cursor as I get asked. So you can see there's cleaning right there for all buildings.
Yeah. Yeah, I think Jason's right. I think it's, you know, looking at the contracted services, especially across the footprint, you know, there might be, unless if we deep dive into it, it might be something where we're better off having, you know, an extra plumber on staff and contracting all this. I don't know. I'm just saying.
I don't think you're going to find, John, correct me if I'm wrong. I don't think, so Jason gave you the one example of the security system, right? I don't think you're going to find contracted services for plumbing in other departments. I think the actual contracted service for the actual infrastructure of the building is pretty much in this building, or excuse me, in this budget.
Right, and if you look at, if you would also, to Andrew's point, if you look at total operations minus the salaries, you're at 205, and like a full-time employee with benefits and stuff, you'd whack into a good, looking at that, good third of it probably. So, you know, we're not at the point where I would recommend any new employees yet. As I put my letter to advisory, you know, down the road, depending how inventory shake out. Right now, we are very fortunate that we have 2 amazing carpenters in-house, and they're doing a lot of good work for us. But, you know, I know I'm taxing them at this point because they're still trying to do all the things we did in-house prior, and they're doing all the extra things we're not now. So I'm trying to take it as easy on them as possible, but contracted services, we're always going to need to an extent. There's really no way around it.
So if everybody can see this is who is actually employees in John's department. Besides John, you got Sue Wood, and then you've got 3 maintenance technicians, and you've got an electrician on staff.
Kathy, we don't see it, but
Blank screen.
Because you're still sharing your internet page versus the Excel you linked into, I think.
Thank God, I
Yeah,
thought it
but
was me.
the information should be there though.
Yes, it's there. I could see it. It's just it's not showing up on the screen.
Okay, now how about now?
No.
No, you still don't see this? You don't see the spreadsheet with the, okay.
Nope.
All right, so there is a spreadsheet attached to this that shows all the details of who John has. So it's John, it's Sue Wood, it's 3 maintenance technicians, and there is an electrician on staff, no plumber, but there's an electrician.
Yeah. Yeah. So Kathy, my only thing is if we look at total operating expenses, it was 163 for 2018, 217 for fiscal year 19, 163 for 20, and then 203 for 22. So it's kind of a big jump from 20 to 22, but I understand how John did it, but there might be some extra padding in there.
Which line are you looking at, Andrew?
Just the total operating expenses.
I'm not seeing a 203 on my operating expenses.
Can you see these salaries now, Andrew?
Yep.
Okay. We'll get rid of that.
Andrew, I don't think there was any padding insofar as not representative of what John tried to do in terms of real costs. But I know that he didn't in particular say, okay, I'm going to throw in an extra X amount just to be safe.
No, I think fiscal year 19 was high. And so when you average them together, it just kind of makes it high. I just think the methodology, because you're taking 3 years of actuals and averaging them and then kind of doing a little math on top, but
This has got to be a hard one to budget.
yeah, it's tough. It's
So Andrew Pfaff, do you have any more questions? Let me go to Andrew
no,
Diddington.
I'm good.
Okay. Andrew.
Kathy, I don't have any questions.
All right, so now remember too, John's got a separate warrant article for facilities the year that we do every year that basically he's got $100,000 to work with to use for our unexpected cost. So he's got that. So John, my question to you on that is, do you think it's still enough? And how do you look so far year to date with fiscal year 21?
So far, so good. Needless to say, it's never enough, Kathy. We could spend all this money in a blink of an eye if we really wanted to. But that's not the goal. I try to work within the confines we're given. I mean, I'd like to see once, things do become more sound budgetarily, maybe increasing that a little bit. Ever since I've been here in this position for 7 or 8 years now, it's been at 100,000. So I think tweaking it up a little bit wouldn't be the worst thing in the world right now. But again, with the budget the way it is, I'm not asking for that.
And John, is that because the buildings for the most part are just old?
It's not even old. It's that the buildings get used a lot. People tend to forget that municipal buildings have continuous traffic. It's not like your home. When you open a door in municipality, you're opening it, 200-300 times a day as opposed to 3 times a day at your house. You're walking over the carpets way more than you would walk in your house. You're using your lavatory fixtures way more than you would in your house. So when you start adding all that up, the extra use, things do break more and things are just costly. I mean, especially, I think you all know me well enough to know that when I do upgrade something, I try to buy a better one so it lasts longer. I am someone who believes in buying better quality to try to get the longest life out of it you can. So I don't want to buy garbage for you guys because I learned a long time ago. Poor people can't afford to buy cheap things. You buy 3 for the price of 1 by the time you're through.
Okay.
And I think that's particularly evident in the senior center renovations that John did. I don't know how many of you recall the senior center before the renovations, but it was somewhat embarrassing to the town. And, John, that design, that work was done by John. And I mean, I think it's one of the better senior centers in the area for sure.
It's definitely better than it used to be for sure.
There was a lot of duct tape, literally.
When we first bought it, that's for sure. All right. I think I covered everybody. So anything else before we say goodnight to John? So John, obviously we're not voting on anything. We've got to wait till we get through it and look at the whole thing as a whole.
Absolutely.
And
Kathy, it
Go
does
ahead,
make sense though. I'm sorry, it makes sense though to at least schedule another meeting with John before town meeting, whenever that may occur, because I think we'll have some more foundational numbers to at least look at and compare with.
Right. And so as John has better numbers for special utilities, he will submit those to clear.gov and they'll be updated. So I agree, John, we probably will see you one more time.
Absolutely. Hey, thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you very much for everything you do.
Hey, have a great night.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
All right. Okay, let's keep going with the departments, then we'll do everything else left. So, Mr. Rooney, you're still with us?
I am. I'll be with you until I let you know that I can't be with you any longer, Kathy.
All right, so we'll do fire next, unless Jason wants to do police. I can't see who's out there, Jason. Just so you
Yeah,
know.
both chiefs are here. So you want me to move Chief Achilles in?
Yeah.
He should be in.
Good evening, everybody.
So Jason, I want you to handle this discussion, and I will do the screen share, but you handle this because you know this so well.
Okay. So I would like to thank Chief Achilles for his time, very similar to John Rooney's opening. I think we're obviously very fortunate to have him. And I'll say it now about Chief Pauls because I know he's already in the office, in the audience. You know, we're very fortunate that we have public safety leaders that are able to balance the needs of a department with a budget and the finances that are given to them. Chief Achilles and I spent a lot of time talking about the documents that he sent in. You'll notice they're pretty robust, and I know we've also referenced the standard of cover, and I know he had circulated that, and that's been widely posted on multiple sources in town. When you look at his budget this year, almost all of it is contractual related to the union employees and the salary increases that they are entitled to by the collective bargaining agreement. I think you'll also notice a decent uptick in the call department, which was actually nice to see because it means that the chief has been able to build out part-time resources that are able to respond back when we actually have emergencies as opposed to idling, obviously, which is part of the fire service and being on call ready to go when emergencies happen. And then I think under the actual operational piece of the budget, the things that we should really talk about, and we're likely not going to resolve tonight, is the ambulance billing continues to go through the operating budget. Yet we obviously all know that we have a separate ambulance fund. And one of the things the chief and I have spoken a lot about is, you know, trying to figure out, is there a way to change that fund so that instead of tying up tax rate dollars per se through the general fund to pay the commissions that are needed for the ambulance billing, you know, tie that directly to the revenue stream that's actually going into the ambulance fund. Those were the main items of conversation related to the operational budget. We did have some good hypothetical conversations about some of the items at the bottom of his memo in terms of wish list moving forward, in terms of either additional personnel that may or may not be needed, but also there's some decent capital needs that obviously capital planning committee will continue to vet with the chief and be making some recommendations, with the probably item in the near term being related to a tender slash tanker, depending on how you think about it, to deal with some of the water supply issues in town. So that was the Chief and I spent a lot of time talking, but Chief, that's probably the 5-minute summary that I had on my list. I don't know if you want to add anything or provide any further details to the committee beyond what you submitted in your narrative.
No, I think that's spot on, Jason. Thank you. You know, we're fortunate that when I took over the reins as the fire department, the idea was to strengthen the essential services And that's what I've been doing. This is FY21 was my first budget that I crafted. Nobody expected COVID, so it's an interesting budget year. And then the FY22 budget builds upon that. I think we're getting a better experience. We're focusing on core operational task and the mission of the department. The memo that kind of gave you, wish lists and ideas to think in the future. I think it's important to predicate that on strategic planning. I would not want to say that all those things have to be done today, or I see them in 2 years or 5 years. I think it's important that we vet that out, and we're planning on embarking on that process probably first of the year. And lastly, the budget's coming in just under 3%. I'm willing to speak to any items you want. One area, Jason, you didn't mention is the, and I understand contracted services are coming up again, is that radio maintenance contract that I can speak to in length. It's not added in my budget right now, but it would bring us over 3% if we put it in.
So I did that on purpose, and I probably should have referenced it because I think we should pull Chief Paulison for that as well. So if you're okay holding that item to the end,
Yep.
And then when we start to transition to police, because I think it crosses obviously both of your departments.
Excellent. Yep.
So can everyone see the overall budget with the 2.96% projected year-over-year increase? Is that on your screen? Somebody say yes. Andrew P.
Yes.
Yes.
All right, does anybody want to see any more detail? The narrative is well written. We've asked everybody to spend a lot of time with it, so we definitely need to then read what Chief Achilles says here. You recall last year we spent a whole lot of time with Chief Achilles, and we talked about adding a position for a deputy. That's not being proposed this year. So I guess I'd like to understand why that he didn't think it was appropriate to bring that up again.
And Kathy, I can answer that. Between advisory and the select board, it was obvious that we couldn't support that in the budget within the parameters we had, and with the pressures coming up on the next couple of year budgets, I committed to focusing on internal professional development and building up the credentials and the experience of the current members. So that was, I thought it was important to give that a couple of years before we embarked on this. And as you saw in my narrative, we need another administrative second in command, if you will. But I am very cognizant of the cost of that and the pressure that would put on the overall budget. So I'm still committed to growing and building up the credentials and competencies of our current members to hopefully, when it's appropriate and the time's appropriate, to reintroduce that.
So Chief, would you be able to say, compared to the other 350 towns and cities in Massachusetts, are we in the middle of the pack, the end of the pack, the front of the pack, as far as providing this quality service that this town probably wants? I mean, you had a lot of things in that wish list, so it worries me that we aren't necessarily doing the things that we should do.
And I'll reference that standard cover. I know it's a very big document, but it really identifies through a pretty stringent process and a legitimate process what we can do today. And as long as everything's status quo, we do fine. We are, again, I've been focused, and I will probably be focused on the next year and the year after on making sure the core services are strong. The essential services are strong. But we need to be prepared for any other pressures on the department. And that's really where that wish list starts to come in and that's why I think it's important. Take that as a very preliminary in my experience, but they need to be vetted out through a strategic planning process. So please don't take those as they have to be done in 5 years or 3 years or 2 years. Jason hit on it. Probably the most pressing thing that came out of this standard cover and what we're seeing is the ability to provide an appropriate fire protection water supply in a lot of the town, specifically the non-hydrant area off Parmenter and Pine Hill. But we also have some other areas in town that have hydrants that are, I would say, far away from the houses. So that's probably the most pressing thing. I think I don't want to say we're in the middle of the pack or the bottom of the pack or the head of the pack. My goal is so that we're in the head of the pack in our region. That's my ultimate goal. So some of these things start to support putting us at the head of the pack.
Okay, so I assume everybody's aware that Jason wears many hats in his life, and one of those, he's a fireman. So he knows a whole lot about this. That's why it's great that he's on advisory to really help with this budget. Okay, so Andrew Pfaff, questions for Chief?
I think the only question I had was on your contracted services. What kind of goes into that number?
So we have a lot of biomedical equipment. So a lot of those will have a service agreement with those, a maintenance agreement. It stabilizes our costs so we don't see large spikes in maintaining, and I'll use the cardiac monitors, the stretchers. They're in there. We also have a records management system and a scheduling system that we maintain that we have to pay for. So most of those are related. Why there was an increase this year, we added a more secure method of maintaining and monitoring our narcotics, our controlled medications. And that comes with a fee, an annual fee. We also, I think it was mentioned earlier, we're paying half of the Signet maintenance contract, which is the security system in the building. So that alone is around $6,000. And the one that Jason brought up that I think is very important to discuss is we pay out of the operating budget and out of that line for ambulance billing service. And that is directly tied to how much revenue we bring in. Last year, we increased the rates and we did pretty well before COVID. So we were actually about $15,000 to $20,000 is for ambulance service.
So you got rewarded. You got rewarded by having this line item go up.
Correct.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you. That's it for me.
Tim?
No questions. Thank you.
Mr. Mooney?
Yes. Chief, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you, John.
Listen, I cannot echo stronger Jason's comments with regards to you and Chief Paulus. I mean, you came on board and you hit the ground running, and it's a great thing to see. And when a town makes a hire such as yourself and of Chief Paulus, we can't do anything wrong. I have about 4 areas that I just wanted to touch base with you. And the 4th just came up as a result of the comment you made a few moments ago about the placement of hydrants and on a wish list that you'd have more hydrants accessible to various residents. How significant of a deficit is there, do you believe? And part two of the question, do you have any idea as to the dollar amount to address that deficit?
As far as hydrants go, again, the most significant area and identified as one of our higher risks because it's larger residential that have not as easy access that you would expect. That homes are not right next to the main road, is the Pine Hill, Parmenter Road area, and all those, everything from Clemens up to Angelica, all those areas are challenged. I can't speak, and I think Karen would have to speak to, what would be the cost of a municipal water supply in those areas. And in the areas that have hydrants, the more I live in town now, and I've been here almost 2 years, it's recognized that if you drive on any of the roads that have hydrants, you'll see them, and they're pretty well reasonably spaced apart. But you have to add that and the length of the driveways in town. We've actually, identifying this risk, we have implemented some procedures to improve our emergency water supply procedures. But I can tell you there's going to be times where only one fire truck can get up the driveway and manage the problem based on width and length of driveways. So I can't speak to how much would it cost to add more hydrants. That's a bigger consideration, but I know that there should be strong consideration to have a mobile water tanker that we have available. The closest ones, closest three are within 25 to 30 minutes away. If your house is on fire, that's a long time.
Right.
That's why we're recommending a serious look at, and I'm kind of surprised that the town doesn't have one, but a water tender, a tanker that's owned by the fire department that we can roll out early. It would also have benefits on Route 9, 495, and the Mass Pike, because there's, except for Route 9, there's really not a fire protection water supply on the interstates.
And Chief, is that tanker truck, and that's probably the wrong name, but is that type of vehicle, do you foresee maybe that being in your budget in the near future, or is it just going to appear on wish lists year after year?
No, I think now that we did a formal risk assessment analysis of the town, it will be on the forefront of a capital request. And the discussion would be, when does that fit in?
Yep.
And not take it, even out the pressure on the budgets. But my concern is every year we don't have one, that's a year we don't have the right water supply for a lot of areas of the town.
So I read your memo and I had it all highlighted with questions in the margin, and I don't have it in front of me, but one question I know I had in there is that it's my understanding that in various areas of town, there's a very bad or non-existent communication between, say, the cruisers and the station. Is that this? Do you experience the same type of problems associated with communications?
Because we share the same antenna sites, we basically have, and I think we talked about this last week, is we have basically 2 antenna sites. We experience the same issues as the police department. If every emergency was within a short distance of the fire station, we'd be in good shape, but that's not the case, just like the police department. And a lot of our work is accomplished outside of the vehicles, where you're on a portable radio that doesn't have the strength as a mobile radio. And both Chief Paulson and I are committed to doing what we can to improve the system, the low-hanging fruit, but I think we're getting closer and closer to the day where we need a more robust, sustainable, and reliable emergency communication system townwide.
Yeah, a side comment. Jason, is that something that the capital planning committee, it's on their radar, or would that be coming, what I'm trying to say is how does that issue come to the forefront? Does it come as part of the capital planning committee review or just the individual department request?
I would think you would have to start with the chiefs bringing forward some sort of proposal. And I think we also should remember that we did approve 45,000 last year to enhance the radio system to digital, which, Chief, my understanding is you went live last week on that.
Yeah,
So-
and we're actually seeing some distinct benefits. Without adding another antenna site, we've improved our coverage probably from about 75 to 80% of the community to 85, 90%. The challenge, I hate to keep on harping on Pine Hill, but that's the challenge area, along with some of the area in the southern part of the town. And that's just because of where, think of the one antenna on Route 9 West and one antenna on Overlook, which is kind of on a hill downtown, but they really need one in that area of kind of Oak Hill was probably the best way to describe it.
Well, let me know. I'll leave you put one in the backyard.
Okay.
And,
I'll remember that,
John-
Andrew. Thank you.
And John, on the chief's request related to the tanker, and he hasn't made a formal request, but he and I have had a lot. It's probably the topic
Okay.
we've discussed the most. That capital planning is planning to take an initial look at that in January and have the chief.
Great. And Chief, I think my last question, and again, my fault for not having this in front of me, your narrative, because it may be addressed in it. And I did read it. I actually read it twice. And for some reason, I can't remember whether this issue was addressed. And it relates to the deputy chief position. There was a lot of talk last year and perhaps the year before that about the deputy position and the need, et cetera. Based upon what you've seen over the last couple of years or the entire time that you've been here, is that a position which at some point you would advocate strongly for it to be created? And period. That's the end of my question mark.
Yeah. And I, as Kathy's earlier question, I think that we need to address that at some point in I would say the medium term. But it's a challenge because if I, as I told you, I'm committed to strengthening the essential services. Well, I'm still trying to get the budget to a place where it's sustainable, predictable, and reasonable. So it's still there, and it may take the form of a deputy or another administrative officer that can technically be second in command. I don't see it going away, but I think it's prudent of myself to make sure that we don't put too much pressure, because that, as you all know, that probably adds another 90,000, 100,000 to the budget, and I don't think we're ready to do that yet.
Plus benefits, plus a car, likely, right?
Yeah.
Sorry, Kathy, I just have one more question. And it relates to your administrative assistant thought process. Is that something, I assume the need exists now, but is that something that, we could creatively try to come up with sharing administrative assistants, or to give you X number of hours of a week from already existing personnel? Or does that person need to be specifically trained in the operations of the fire department, such that having temporary help would not really address the concerns or the problems you have?
Yeah, just to be clear, we do have an administrative assistant that's in the SAP, that's a full-time position at 32 hours a week. So
right.
That's not a sworn fire officer with authority as a fire officer. And we upped the hours from 28 to 32 last year, and it's working. So I don't want that to be confused with, and I meant administrator. Right now, the only person not in the collective bargaining agreement is me. And I'm fortunate I have a captain that takes on call and covers in my absence for no additional pay. So
Okay, so I must have misunderstood
Yeah.
your earlier comment about an administrative assistant work.
okay. Yeah, I'm sorry. I apologize for.
No, I apologize for just taking up 3 or 4 minutes when I didn't need to. Kathy, again, I apologize for these questions, but I'm done. Thank you.
Thanks, John.
They're great questions. That's your job. All right, let's see. Next person, I believe. Andrew D.
Chief, thank you very much. I don't have any questions right now.
Oh, thanks, Andrew.
Judy.
Yes, thank you very much. It's very enlightening to hear all this explanation. I have no more questions.
So Chief Achilles, I live off Pine Hill Road, so thank you for those comments. You know, it is, I hope everybody understood that not only do we have no water and no communication. So it is quite a problem. And of course, the reason it is because we're cut off from Southborough. That's why there's no water there, because you have to go into Framingham to get to Pine Hill Road. So it's definitely a problem. The neighborhood definitely would like to do something about it. It's hopeful that at some point we'll have this problem solved, because we really do think our houses are going to burn if they're on fire. Because Chief, we've also got some really wicked driveways over there too to try to get up. I don't know if you've seen some of them, but they're pretty bad. So I do hope we find a solution at some point so that the neighborhood will rest easier.
And Kathy, just for anybody listening, and I think for your benefit also is, again, this whole risk assessment tool is awesome. And it actually factually identified some things. That's why you didn't see the tanker last year, because I wanted to vet this out. But we are looking at some pre-planning and procedures to be more efficient in that area. But I can tell you that the expected outcome for the same fire in that area versus other areas of town is much different. And we will do, we'll protect property and protect life, but we are trying to address these issues that with non-monetary approach, but at some point we're gonna need some assistance in having some of the things are gonna cost some money, but that's for the larger group to support and decide.
Hooking into Framingham's water supply might be an answer too that has been discussed, so keep that one in mind. All right. I think that's it, I think that's it, and now we can start talking about the combined problem.
I'm gonna move.
You ready for that?
Yeah, I'm gonna move Chief Paulus in.
Or the common problem?
Chief, one quick question while we have you still. Is there an issue with water pressure with the hydrants at all, or the pump takes care of that? I mean, I know I have a pressure tank here, and because I have no pressure, but.
So the Public Works done a great job we have pretty good pressure and pretty good volume, but there's only so much water we can physically move over distance. And we have measures in place that we can apply different tools to increase the pressure, but you need the pump. That's the biggest thing we need. So again, that's why we're embarking on a whole townwide pre-planning, so we can identify some of the areas that we need more resources, different resources. Again, these are non-cost items, but it starts, gets us down the road to be more efficient and use what exists better. So that's how we're approaching it now until, again, we can get other tools.
Thanks.
Hey, Kathy and Jason, before Chief Paulus comes and makes his presentation, I'm going to get up from my advisory seat and sit in the audience. And I just want to make sure I understand that and make sure the Chief understands that I'm not running away. But I'm compelled to recuse myself from all discussions relating to the police budget. Thanks.
So Jason, do you move him out?
I'm gonna mute him and disable him from talking. So I'll move him back in when Chief Paulus leaves, if that's okay with you, John.
I'm sorry, did you not, you couldn't hear anything I said?
No,
we
we
did.
heard you. I'm gonna disable you from talking, and I will move you back in when Chief Paulus departs, if that's your intention.
Okay, yep. Thank you.
All right, all set.
All right, so is Chief Paulus in?
He is there. He's on mute though.
Hey, Chief
Yes.
Paulus, but we need you to unmute yourself.
I sent him a prompt. While he unmutes, Kathy, I'll give the background of the item that Chief Achilles started to allude. When we built the public safety facility, there was extensive conversation between Chief Morrow at the time and Chief Paulus about which radio system vendor, et cetera, that we should go with. And you'll probably recall a lot of those discussions on the building committee. And there was a new, basically, dispatch center built as part of the building. With that came a 1-year warranty. That warranty, as many would probably expect, has ended in September, which is kind of the date that, you think about Labor Day-ish, is the date where everything kind of ended. When I was talking with Chief Paulus in particular, but Chief Achilles also made references to it, I became aware that we did not enter into a warranty or an extended service contract to maintain these moving forward. We decided to, I'll call it, let it ride a little bit, in terms of, if you think about the John Parent approach that he talked about earlier in the meeting of, hey, if something breaks, we can do it probably a little cheaper, maybe on time and materials. And the chiefs can probably articulate this better, but I think what I heard that asked me to have them really think about how they approach this moving forward is that they're not getting people, like, they're calling the company and the company's not coming when they have issues. And with the service contract, I think it would potentially resolve that fact. So this is not in any department's budget, police, fire, or facilities at this point. We don't obviously have a separate dispatch budget. It's part of the police budget. But I think before we let Chief Achilles depart, I think we should offer views from this committee of whether we want to continue kind of letting it ride here in waiting on a response. We're spending approximately $18,000 a year to have kind of this warranty service plan in place to get not only a better response, but kind of limit, the upside of our liability. Now, there are obviously times when we may go a month or two without calling, just like if you have an HVAC policy at home or anything like that, you may not call it at all 1 year, and you may call 3 times the next year. So I think that's something that we should discuss here tonight. And then if advisory at least is at least tentatively in favor of it, we should ask them to add it into ClearGov so we're maintaining it moving forward. And obviously, if we aren't in favor of it, we should have further discussion. And I'll let the chief speak to what they may do for the rest of the year as well, if everyone's on board with this sort of approach for adding it for FY22. So, chiefs, I don't know which one of you wants to take it from here, but I think it's important to have both of you in this discussion.
Chief Paulus, do you want me to just kind of explain a little bit about the radio maintenance in the system and kind of what we faced this last couple months?
Yes, please.
Okay, so I think Jason explained it pretty well. Is we have a lot of expensive and critical equipment that we don't have a service agreement on. Again, I think our approach has been to be frugal and do the best we could. We've used some in-house members of my department and the chief's department to try to troubleshoot, and instead of calling out a service technician from a company all the time, see if we could do it better and cheaper. And then if we got into trouble, we would call the service technician. Unfortunately, we had a critical problem with antennas, which I mentioned last week, where it affected the police department, where we had some significant radio issues, and we also had some serious safety issues because of the lack of that radio. Again, we tried to do the best we could. We recognize that when you call the radio company that manages and services the type of equipment we have, if you don't have a service agreement, you pay more when they come, and they come when they're available. We talked about a service agreement last year, and this is for any equipment that doesn't work or we're having communication issues. It's a component thing. It's not an extended warranty. So we have talked in length of trying to have a reliable maintenance and experts working on our system, because it's becoming too critical not to have emergency communication capabilities. So the option exists. We can enter an agreement with the local radio company. It's an annual fee of about $17,300, I think is what I have. We don't have in our budget. It's not budgeted anywhere. We're bringing it forth now because we think it's extremely important to ensure we have emergency communications 24/7. Both Chief Paulson and I discussed, it's so important that we would like to enter into an agreement in January to get us from January to July. And we're prepared to use Harvard and both split that, our share, so that we can get that up and running. There's some things, like everything else, like the service agreement on your car, that it will cover and won't cover, but we need experts managing and working and repairing our system, and we need them to be able to do it in a timely fashion, sometimes within hours, not days, to get this fixed. So nobody is carrying the budget. I'm prepared to cover it in our budget if we have to, but my recommendation someday is that's not covered in either the police or the fire, but in some other budget. And I'll leave it to Chief Boss if he wants to add anything to that.
No, I completely agree. I think you stated it well. I think, if we had a lot more redundancy in the system, where you had backups if something goes down, where you can wait a day or two or three for somebody to come out, but that doesn't exist. And I think, like the chief said, kind of had a little bit of a wake-up call, had some serious incidents about a couple of weeks ago, and it's just critical. I think he stated it correctly. It needs to be repaired within hours, not days or after the weekend. So I was originally on board to say it is a new system. Maybe we can stretch it out a little bit, but I think clearly we need this. And the people that are out on the street, the first responders, they need to have confidence that it's going to be repaired as quickly as possible as well.
And Chief, am I correct that most of the issues currently are happening outside the building? So it's not necessarily, I mean, there are definitely probably things happening inside the building, but are most of these things happening outside of your buildings at this point in terms of where the repairs are needed?
I think that that's correct. They're at some of the sites. We're seeking out grants to, like, we don't have an emergency backup power for one of our antenna sites. So we're trying to get a grant to get a backup generator, but if anything happens up there, we don't have the expertise to fix it. And we need a service technician to identify the problem and then do the repair. But it doesn't mean that something can't happen inside our building. And we have some very expensive, complicated communications equipment at the public safety building. And if there's a problem with that right now, we would have to make a call and hope that they put us on their schedule.
Is the 18K, to go back to what Jason just said, is this going to cover what Jason just asked about outside, or is it just the equipment inside the building?
It is both. I'm just seeing if I have the I have a quote here. And if you just give me a second, I will speak to it a little bit. The agreement, and I don't want to get into the nuts and the weeds about it, I should say, but it covers I can't even tell you half this stuff because you won't understand what it is. I don't understand what half of it is. But most of it is the consoles that are in dispatch, all the switches, all the repeaters, all the receivers, the switches, the antennas, the cabling. It's basically the whole structure of our communication system would be covered. There's some things, again, if it gets hit by lightning, it's not going to be covered. If animals chew wires, it's not going to be covered. I think also if it floods, it doesn't get covered. But a lot of this is technical equipment that needs inside and outside the building. It's a very integrated system that's complicated.
But is it just labor? They're not going to replace our $350,000.
No, this is labor. So think about it in your car. This would be the service agreement that they're going to fix your car. They're not going to replace your car.
But they replace your parts with a service agreement.
Yeah, car warranty, usually is bumper to bumper. So
some parts would be covered, but there are larger parts that wouldn't be covered, and that's something that we have to start looking at beyond this.
All right. So the advantage of this is you've got people who will come faster. I assume it's 7 days a week.
24/7.
24/7. You'd have a cap on probably the labor piece of it, at least most of it. So it makes sense. And there's enough money in each of your Harvard funds to cover it currently?
No, we have no funds for it.
In the Harvard?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
The Harvard fund, we're prepared to, because it's halfway through the year, that we would cover that. I'll be honest, I'm hesitant to use Harvard for a reoccurring service agreement. I don't think that's the intent of it, but knowing that we would like to do that in the middle of a fiscal year, I think it's only appropriate that we both share that responsibility this year.
And they'll sign a half-year contract with you?
Yes.
And there is enough money in each of your Harvard accounts currently to do this?
To do that for the 6 months, but there's nothing for the full year.
Okay, but we can deal with fiscal year 22. All right, so Jason, I assume you know what you want to know about this?
I knew, it's more for the benefit of the committee, because I think we owe the chiefs a general direction of where we would head on this as a budgetary item, because what we don't want them to do is to go sign a contract tomorrow, use Harvard funds for 6 months, and then kind of rip it out from underneath them because town meeting does. Ultimately, we have to rely on town meeting, but I think if the committee's not in favor of this, that's going to send a pretty clear signal of, what they should or shouldn't do.
So the proposal for fiscal year 22 is to split it 50-50, or did I not hear right?
We're prepared to put it in one budget or the other. I'm prepared to put in the fire budget. That's not my preference, I think it should sit outside both the police and fire budgets. Because like the Signet security service agreement, these are pretty substantial. I think they're getting close to almost 3/4 to 1% of our budget. As these continue to go up, we're going to have to start making other decisions in our operating budgets. And I'll let Chief Paul speak to it. I just think these should sit somewhere else. We shouldn't get hit for trying to make it having service agreements that ultimately save money and improve services.
We talked about that previously with John Parent, so maybe that is what we should do. I doubt if it's going to happen for fiscal year 22, though. So we will discuss that piece of it.
But we're prepared to put in the fire budget if I feel that strongly that we need it, that we would do that.
All right, so that would take yours up another almost 1%.
Bring us up about 3 to 3.79%.
So, okay, because what the part year one fiscal year 21 is 18, so for the full year it's 36.
No, I'm sorry. For the full year, it's about 17. I have the quote from you. It's $17,035
for the full year.
Yep.
Okay. All right. So yeah, you'll take it. So I agree. I was wrong. Okay. So Jason, do you have any more questions before we keep going?
No questions.
Right, Andrew Pfaff?
2 quick questions. Would this cover that antenna issue we had, or that one remaining antenna that we may need to repair down the road?
It's hard to say, but I think most of it would have been covered because we would have had them do the install, and they would have been responsible for the equipment that was ordered. So, and I'll double check and I'll work with Chief Paulus. I think there's some things that would be covered, but of course it's better to repair something than to replace it. But yes, it would have helped us with the antenna.
Okay. And
Chief, I'd be surprised if they would pay for that whole antenna. We made a mistake ordering something wrong. I don't know that they would think it's their responsibility to buy the correct antenna, maybe install. And I'm not sure how it got split between labor and materials.
No, but we would have had, we would have probably had them do the work. And if there was a problem, they would have to resolve the problem. And if it was their fault, they would cover it.
Oh, okay.
That's not what happened this time.
Yep. All right, Andrew D.
I don't have any questions about the current discussion. I think the way that it's been explained, again, this is a lot of detail for me to process, but it sounds like there's a consensus from the two of you that it would make sense to get this service agreement in place and to start it with the Harvard funds. And then it's going to be part of the FY22 budget.
You got it.
My only request on this would be that we have somebody that has some expertise in contracts look this over. I've also had to bring Signet in a few times, and we get into some back and forth on what's covered and what's linked to another operating system and who's responsible. So it is quite a sum of money. So I would prefer that somebody sat down and looked at this and really spells out what the parameters are for it and what we can expect.
So that's why we have a town council. So why don't you get Mr. Purple involved and get it to Aldo to look at?
Already emailed them on that point today, so.
All right. Tim?
Nothing to add.
Judy?
Nothing to add.
Okay, that's it. All right. So we will discuss this, chiefs, and get back to you sooner than later. Okay.
And Kathy, I just want to add, and I probably should have mentioned this before, that one of the advantages of this agreement is annually included in the contract is them to come in and do a tune-up and alignment on all equipment. So hopefully one of the benefits is that we don't have, we nip things in the bud before they become bigger problems. So I think that I should have mentioned that before. That's probably one of the distinct benefits of this type of agreement. So hopefully consider that when you deliberate.
Right, we're going to talk about it as soon as we hear Chief Paulus in his budget, so you guys can either stay and listen to us, or we'll let you know tomorrow.
Okay.
Would it be possible to get a copy of it?
Of the proposal?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I don't think there's anything with sharing it, so I can do that.
Thank you.
All right. Okay, thank you, Chief Achilles. You're welcome to stay, but we're going to now talk to Chief Paulus.
Good evening, everybody.
Hi. It's been a long time since we've seen you.
Yes, it has. A lot of people in town. That's, one of the things you don't think about is, while going all the way back to March, the people that you're used to seeing on a daily or weekly basis, something I'm hoping that we're going to get back to soon.
We missed your building too. I'll put all our meetings there. Okay. So Jason, do you want to introduce Chief Paulus's budget, or you want him to kick it off?
I'll give a similar overview that I gave for Chief Achilles, if Chief Paulus is okay with that.
Sure.
So like Chief Achilles, Chief Paulus and I met on multiple occasions. The second time, Lisa Braccio from the Board of Selectmen was also there, who's the police liaison. And obviously, Chief Paulus is presenting a higher percentage increase than we just heard from Chief Achilles. But we spent a lot of time discussing what's driving it. Primarily, it's based on the union contract. Almost everything, when you go line by line, and kudos to him and his entire team for the level of detail that they provide on the salaries. Originally I'll be honest, I had sticker shock. The chief slid me a piece of paper. It showed the 7% increase. But as we drilled down into it, I got more comfortable with it because honestly, we're not involved with the contract negotiations, but I did spend some time walking, making sure Lisa was comfortable with it, because obviously I think as the board negotiates any union contract or any contract in general, they should start to make sure they're taking into account the full 3-year spread of it and how it may look. We obviously have the burden of the new officers that were approved at the last town meeting here too, for a full year times 2. And I think you also, when you look at the details, the chief has had a lot of turnover, which naturally you would say, you're going from a much higher compensated person based on steps, level, et cetera, to someone that's lower compensated because they're more junior in their career. But if you look at how the contract is actually structured, these folks are getting tremendous increases every year in terms of not only just the cost of living, but they're getting a step increase as well. And the chief can speak to his experience with steps, et cetera, but I just think it's important for everyone to understand where that's coming from. My main concern is actually something that is not in the budget for this year, but it's forward looking, is I'll call it the Band-Aid approach we're taking to our dispatch operation, which falls under Chief Paulus. But to be quite honest, Chief Achilles' team uses them as well. And I think that needs to be part of further study. And there's been the concept of regional dispatch thrown around. And it's something I've had conversations at length with both chiefs about. But there's been significant turnover in that department. And those shifts are not staffed always by full-time personnel. And usually, there's a lot of dispatchers that start their career as dispatchers, but move in typically to the police service, and use it as a stepping stone in their career. So there's nothing recommended by the chief this year, but I think it's incumbent upon this group to understand that if the town wants to maintain its own dispatch operation moving forward, it's going to come at the expense of a FTE or more. However, if we start to think ahead and get ahead of a request coming from Chief Paulus and find a way to maybe mitigate that cost, whether it be some sort of regional approach or some other creative way. And part of this is funded by grants. I think we'll be in a better spot. You can't see it per se here the way that ClearGov is presented and the way Kathy has it on the screen. But the chief did in his budgetary worksheets actually break out between dispatch and police this year, which I think was different than prior years as well. So I guess I'll pause there, but that was really my big takeaway of even once we get through budget season, what I feel like I need to work with both chiefs on to figure out a sustainable approach there, because otherwise it's going to start costing us a lot of money, but also impact the level of service that we're providing. So, Chief, I don't know what else you want to add, highlight further on that.
I think Jason had it right. Even when Cindy McLeod first gave me the run at the budget, I looked at the number and I thought that there must be something wrong. But then when we started running down it, the only thing that I could think back on is when you look at a school budget, and it helps in favor of them when you see a lot of veteran teachers retire who are at the quote unquote top step, and they bring in people at, the first step. It impacts their budget positively. We have a young department who are all moving up on the 9 or 10 step raise. So you combine that with increased educational incentives as they move on their career, step raises, and contractual raises. It affects every line item of the salary. So that's what's driving the entire budget. It's all contractual. There might be a 1% increase, and some of that you can just see the TASER lease program used to be in a capital budget. They moved that here, and then the Signet warranty for the security system. I think Cindy told me today that if you move those out of the budget, it would be about 6.5. But it's generally, 99% contractually driven.
Chief, do you want to touch on your training? Because I think there's a decent increase there too.
Yeah, there's a little bit. There's $4,000. As you know, nationally, the profession's under tremendous scrutiny. I had a meeting with the Board of Selectmen. There's a criminal justice reform bill in the legislature. Training's always an issue. You can never have enough of it. I thought about, if you look at the numbers, I thought about bringing that up to 20,000, which would be about $1,000 per officer. I know it's not a great year to go to increase in everything. I cut that down to about $750 per officer, up from $500. And that's really only to pay for classes. Really, the big driver in sending people to training is the overtime, because they're doing it outside of their regular hours. I will say that we had just really started to establish our training room as a destination with some of the training providers around the state, and then COVID hit. So we were in a situation where if we agreed to host a class, we'd get free tuitions. Hopefully that'll pick up, in the coming year, where we can utilize that. But I actually think that that's a very small increase looking at what the profession's facing. We also going to take advantage. I just got approval. It's been probably like almost a 2-year process. We got a $45,000 virtual reality trainer that we can use in our training room. And I got that grant where we host it, but it's in conjunction with the other boroughs, Westboro and Northborough. And we've done a great job sharing services with both those towns. As you know, we have the mental health clinician through the Advocates program, and Westboro covers that grant, and we benefit from it.
Jason, I don't see the training. Where is it?
It's under operating expenses.
It's 15,000. Okay, I got it. Right, thanks, Chief. Okay, so let me. So Andrew Pfaff.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just mostly all contractual. Do you know how much of the impact is the full year impact of the delayed hires of the new officers?
I know Cindy had that broken down. Jason, was it in the packet that I sent to you? I know we went over that at some point.
I don't think it's in any of the 6 attachments that she gave.
I do have that document. I can get it to you first thing in the morning.
Sure. I mean, I think that's just a good thing to know. If we know that, of the whatever 7%, 5 is because, we had a partial year. And then
No way it's that much. So Chief, refresh our memory. When did the 2 start?
We had one start in early September. He's still in the FTO program. And then the second one, which was a January 1st hire, we just secured a spot for February 8th in Randolph, and he'll come out of the academy in early July, and then he'll enter the 12-week FTO program as well. So we really haven't seen an impact from either of those approvals yet.
Okay, so if I did the math correctly, I think it's maybe 1 to 1.5%.
Yeah, there are some other numbers. Obviously, their uniforms, added training, extra ammunition, holiday pay, a number of things. But I know Cindy has a sheet which breaks it all down to the penny.
Chief, certainly it's contract related, but the educational incentive had a pretty good jump from last year. Was that contract related?
Yeah, that's been in the contract. So if different offices, they proceed through their degrees, we're looking at one officer, I believe, is going to get his master's degree. He's on a stipend. And then another officer that's still grandfathered into the Quinn bill, he'll get his master's. So he'll be due for a 5% raise just by attaining his master's degree in the coming year. And then I think there's somebody else who got an associate's degree. Cindy spelled it out in the notes, what we expect.
Okay.
There's also another line item for reimbursement for courses, and that was a contract negotiated. It's $15,000. We had never really hit that amount. We gave back that money every year. I think it's going back 3 or 4 years now. So when I did roughly a $30,000 cut to last year's budget, I had cut back about $5,000 off of that, but I'm restoring it because it looks like that money will be spent going forward. It's a tuition reimbursement is the line item. Went from 10,000 back to the 15,000, which is listed in the contract.
Okay, I think that takes care of mine. Major question. I think I'm looking at the numbers. I think it was the biggest one was the new officers all have the $7,000 incentive. So I think that was different than the budget for last year because we didn't know who they were going to be. That makes sense.
Both the hires have bachelor's degrees.
Yeah. So I think, Kathy, that's something is the hires are probably more expensive than we originally might have thought they were, but they're more experienced.
I do believe we budgeted for a bachelor's degree. That's pretty much the norm.
Yeah.
But you wouldn't see, in this year's budget, you wouldn't see that because they were supposed to be in the academy. So you're right. You would see it in the July 1st budget.
Yeah, that's what I say. I see the prorated mark, so I'm just wondering.
Let me just interject before we bring Tim in. So, Chief Paulus, do you think this is going to repeat next year too? That we're going to end up with this kind of statutory increase?
Well, I think you'll see more offices hitting their max step. I could definitely have Cindy break that down for you.
Because, the reason I'm interested in this, we had this same conversation with the schools for years. Now, obviously they have many more teachers than you do policemen. But the reason these schools have been able to control their budget the last few years and have it look something, like a 3% or so cost of living increase is because they did exactly what you just said a minute ago. They are able to, as the older teachers retire, they're bringing on younger teachers that are less expensive. And the older group has already maxed out as far as the steps and lanes. So they're there, they just get a cost of living once they get so far up. So they've been able to control it the last few years. A few years ago, before that, they weren't. They had 7% year-over-year salary increases, which was a real problem. Obviously, your budget is nowhere near as big as the school. So, $2.5 million is not, $30 million. But still, this is a big year-over-year increase to really not be able to do much about.
I guess you could look at it two ways. I mean, you're saving money making people build up to the max rate. However, you have to understand that that's a budget escalator every year. In my last employment, basically everybody got off probation and everybody made the same amount of money, but they made it up in longevity payments. So you'd get a one lump sum, every 5 years, every 10 years, every 15 years. Which was quite handsome, but it wasn't in your overtime, and you could budget more clearly for it. So I guess you could say, you save money and by not paying them a very high salary, in year one moving forward. So, but I do understand it. It's an escalator. Obviously, if there's 3% between the steps and the guy's making much more money on the 7th year, then that 3% increase is going to be more, on top of the contractual increase. But Cindy's very, very good with her numbers, so I could project it out for you for the following year as well. But I know there was a contingent, I believe, probably 5 to 6 offices hired around 2011, 2012. So they should be coming out of their max steps shortly.
Okay, all right. So I didn't mean to interrupt. So Tim?
Yeah, I'm just trying to follow through. This is, Kathy, if I'm reading this right, salaries full-time is down 7%?
No, it's up.
I'm looking at the line below that.
I believe we broke out dispatch. So just combine the two numbers and you'll get last year's number.
I'm just,
Dispatch, you have to scroll down, Kathy, to get that.
I guess my question, and again, if salaries full-time are down 7%, then how are the steps and lanes contributing to that?
You have to add the dispatch salary full-time line at the bottom.
Which line is that?
Keep going down, Kathy. Keep going right there. No, you passed it.
Here.
Yeah. So the 216,000 would have been in the budget in FY21.
Okay.
And don't get fooled by these down arrows here. This is misleading just because there's nothing over here. I don't know why it does that. That's a software issue. It's added up right.
Kathy, 50,000 of the increase is the 2 new officers.
Right, and that's even less than what I said.
Also, the
no,
chief.
well, 50, okay, 1% is 23, so it's 2%. It's 2%. Okay, all right, so that's some of it. Tim, you want to go any further with that?
No,
All right.
not tonight.
All right. So Andrew Pfaff, have you asked your questions or you want to ask more questions?
I think that the only other question that I was going to ask, I guess it's Chief Achilles too, is for that radio program, is there anything in here? I mean, I see different radio repair line items. Is any of that cost already baked into here? Like you had budgeted for the time and materials, but now you're going to switch to the service contract?
I think the radios this year were the new portables, right, Chief, for your 2 new officers?
That's not even listed in here. I do have a line item for radio repair and maintenance. It's very low. That would be if somebody's portable broke, it had to be put out for service, something like that. So that's just in my budget, it's only $1,100, and that's just in case, like I said, an emergency happened, we broke an antenna or something like that. One of the cruises needed something. It doesn't cover any of the other items we talked about for the main radio system at all.
I was thinking more of that. Would that service agreement cover any of these?
It would not.
Okay, perfect. That's all I had, Kath.
All right, Andrew D.
Yeah, the question I was going to ask was the question that Tim asked, basically, is how do you square everything that's going on with, how the line items look in Clearview, ClearGov. But just kind of big picture, when this budget came up, I was thinking of like the frame of reference for last year, the discussion we had about adding the 2 new officers and kind of looking for where is that here. So I guess what, as Andrew was saying, the cost of adding the new full-time officers is included in here, or is it because it was a split hire, we're going to see more of the impact next year?
The latter. So it's going to be, part of this increase is explained by the fact that those 2 new officers are now full-time in fiscal year 22, and each one was partially in fiscal year 21. And Andrew P just computed that as a $50,000. That explains $50,000 of the proposed increase between 21 and 22.
Okay, I mean, it's just something we're going to have to watch, because if you look at, the line you've got highlighted there, it's gone from fiscal year 19, 1.9 million, then looks smaller increase, and now it's up to 2.3 in just 1, 2, 3 years. So I have done the math what the total overall increase is, but
it's $168,000 is the proposed increase between fiscal year 21 budgeted and fiscal year 22. And Andrew's math is that 50 of that is explained by basically having the 2 new people from last year be full-time for fiscal year 22.
We've basically added about 7 offices since 2013, 2014. So it's not only the 2 offices, we've been really adding probably about 1 a year since 2014.
And we can't go back that far with this, but we can go back to 19 and look at your actual. You're up about 25% from
Kathy?
2019. Yes, sir. Yes,
Correct me if I'm wrong, but last year with the staffing hires that we supported, that brings us up to what the chief considers to be the minimum safe levels is, correct?
Mm-hmm.
If I remember.
People, and he says, yes, he if you read his narrative, he says that basically he's there as far as being at the right staffing with the 2 hires from last year.
Okay, that makes sense to me. It also does explain the increase in the budget over the last 5 years or so.
Very quickly, if you staffed at 21 offices, you need 6 on each shift to guarantee a 3-man minimum, 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. And then the other 3 are the detective, the lieutenant, and the chief. So you need 18 officers available for patrol to do a 3-man minimum.
So maybe, Chief, based on Andrew's math, I believe that it's even more than 2%. So maybe next year this really will come down some, just because you're not going to have the conversion of the part-time people to full-time. Again, you've got your 21 people. So maybe it won't be as bad next year, even with the steps, et cetera.
Well, I think we can work with Cindy I think we will know that. Right, like Cindy has all the data, but assuming, the same slate of officers, you got to move everyone a step on the scale, which is another 5 or 6%. But like the chief said, some are maxing out, right? So maybe some won't. So it only ends up at 3 or 4. I don't know. I think it's a good question that we should just schedule out, because I think it also then potentially impacts overtime, because if they're getting a higher rate, the chief's able to cover less overtime hours through his overtime budget.
So Chief, can she go ahead and do that for next year, so we can just see what we think it looks like based on what she knows?
Oh yeah, I'm sure she can give you a rough number. She can just take the date of hire and see where they are on the steps and punch the numbers in. And we're still under contract for 1 more year. So she'll have their raise, locked in. She's excellent. I'm sure she can get it done fairly quickly.
Jason, will you get that from her? Fiscal year 23 projected also?
Yeah, I'll work with the chief and Cindy and come back.
Andrew D., do you have any further questions for Chief Paulus?
No, other than that, I wanted to express appreciation to the chief for everything you're doing and all of your officers are doing during a very, very challenging time since we last met in March. It doesn't go unnoticed. I just wanted to express appreciation.
Thank you so much. I've said a number of times that the profession's really going through a change in perception, and I'm certainly glad to be finishing my career in a place like Southborough, while that change takes place. And I know everybody, all of the staff, feels the same way.
So Jason, Chief Achilles did have his hand up. I don't know if he still wants to, because we were talking about the radios when he raised his hand. So Chief Achilles, if you still want to say something, raise your hand again. Okay, he did.
Should be in.
I just wanted to add, I think Chief Paul said it, that our budget also includes a radio repair line, and it's for those miscellaneous repairs that aren't covered by a service agreement. Microphone, the microphones, the antennas on the vehicles, the portable radios, if something happens to them. So they're typically repairs that are $500 or less, or it could be one portable. It's not part of the larger service agreement. And I also did send that proposal with the language to both Jason and Kathy that they can share.
But yours is bigger than Chief Paulus's. Okay, so Andrew D., do you have anything else?
No, thank you.
Okay. So Tim, have I already called on you for police?
You did?
Somehow we've gotten out of order here, so I'm seeing you again. Okay, Judy.
No, I just have tremendous confidence in the Southborough Police. And I think that the extra money that we pay them for getting additional education is very well spent. That's it.
Okay, and I have no questions. So thank you, Chief Paulus.
Thank you. Good to see everybody.
Good to see you.
too.
Good
Thank you,
evening.
Chief Achilles,
Thank you.
again. Okay.
Thanks, chiefs.
Take
All
care.
right. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing my screen, at least for now.
I suppose we should bring John back in, huh?
Yes.
I'm working on some logistics as we speak. John is back in and the chiefs are out.
Okay. All right, it's 8:30. Let's see if I can get this wrapped up in 30 minutes. Okay, so I'm going back to the agenda player. So John, I think you're back in. I know you muted stuff, but I think you're back in.
I just
Okay.
muted you, John, just FYI.
Okay, all right,
Yeah,
so let's, go ahead, Andrew.
I just need to take a quick break, get some water. I'll be right back. Okay.
All right, we're going to approve minutes.
Oh, well, then maybe I should stay.
Go get your water. What else can I do here? Go get your water. All right, so I'm going to do the chairman's update because there's only one thing on it, which is to update everybody on where we stand as far as our IT person vacancy. So they are continuing to go down the path of basically replacing Tom. They've got several resumes, I think 5, and they are starting the interview process very soon with the hope they'll have someone in place by the first of the year. So right now we still do not have a replacement, and we are still dependent on a couple of town employees like Jason and Tim Davis, and then the part-time person to do what we have to have done. We're also using the school people when we need to too, so they've agreed to help out when we need to be. So we are limping along. So Tim Martell, I know you keep up with this. I don't know if you saw the news today. Company in Silicon Valley that's famous for keeping hackers out of other people's companies got hacked. And they think it's a government that did theirs too. So
Yeah, the list just gets bigger and bigger.
Yep. But that's what they did for a living. They got hacked. Okay, Andrew D is back. All right, let's approve the minutes from 12/9. Claire, another brilliant job.
Thank you
All right.
very much.
Um,
They were a little detailed this time because of all of the stuff about the Board of Health. I really thought that was important to concentrate on.
Yep, I agree. So, all right. Who's got any changes, any edits? Jason?
I have a very minor one is for Mary Lou, when we're talking about the Board of Health, we list her name and then I think we start abbreviating it at some point. And I didn't see, I could have missed it, the actual defining. So just being consistent there, either username or define like we did some of the other advisory members.
Okay.
So you
I'll
think we
double check
did
that
her initials
and,
MW? Okay. All right, so you got that one, Claire?
I do, yes.
Anybody else? Andrew? Beth? Andrew D?
I just had one on line 154. It says B of Health. I think it's just supposed to be Board of Health. But other than
Yeah,
that,
there were, I can actually, most of the time I was doing B of H, but I'll go through and make it consistent, whatever. It's just a search and replace. So whatever.
I think that's the only one. So you can just delete the Health.
And I'm sorry, Andrew, what line was that?
154.
Okay.
So Claire, he just wants you to delete the ALTH after H. Just make it.
Oh, yeah, yeah, I see it. Okay. An unusual spelling.
The old English version or something.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Tim?
I'm good.
Judy?
I'm good.
I got a few. I'm okay with line 18. I just want to point out something that I misspoke at first. The Board of Health, what they're asking as far as 7/1/22 and then now 1/1/20, 7/1/21, and then now 1/1/21 is they want 1.5 nurses. They've got the half nurse right now. They want a whole full nurse. So they don't want to upgrade from half to full. They want an additional nurse. Now, later on in the minutes, it's clarified, so I don't think we need to change it because I said that. I mean, this is recording what I said, but I just want to make sure everybody understands they want a whole new nurse.
Well, this is what was in their letter, Kathy, so that makes sense. But then they, on the meeting, said and a half.
Yeah. Okay. So just to be clear, does everybody, because we're going to talk about this in a second, that they want a full-time nurse and a part-time nurse. That's what they want as of 7/1/21 and now as of 1/1/21. Okay.
Okay, so
I don't think you need to change anything because I think
Okay.
it's clear. I'm just saying I misspoke at first as far as what
Okay.
they want. Then on line 21, same thing. Mark Purple, correct me on this. They've had one per diem nurse up till now. They've got two more about to start, which I'm going to explain in a second, but up to now they've won. But again, I said two, so the minutes are right. I was just wrong. Okay, line 55, Claire, you just need to spell subsidies correctly. You just need to put an I in there, IES.
Oh, okay.
55.
Okay, yeah.
Line 65, toward the end, required for a part-time employee to transition, so it should be singular, not plural. So get rid of the S.
I'm sorry, what line was that?
65.
65.
We've got 2/3 over. Transition should just be singular and not plural. So just get rid of the S.
Okay.
I'm sure John Rooney, if he's here, is rolling his eyes at me. Okay, let's see. So line 1, we did 154. Okay, we did 155. Okay, now go to 179. Sarah Castle, director, and 2 youth commission board members. So add the word board in between commission and members.
Okay.
Okay. Line 188. If I said that, I didn't mean to say that. Casey introduced the big picture with youth and family budget and that it would be uploaded to the OneDrive folder. I'm not going to upload individual budgets to the OneDrive folder. All I'm going to do is keep the overall Excel workbook in OneDrive. The individual budgets we're still going to get to with YouGov.
Gotcha.
Okay, so I don't think I said that. If I did, I didn't mean to say that.
No, it's probably my interpretation, or I think at each budget you indicated that it would be up on ClearGov, and I probably, because I haven't had a chance to really look at it at ClearGov. So,
Kathy, I think it might have been in reference to the write-up. The write-up.
Okay, well, I'm also not putting that in OneDrive. The write-ups are also on ClearGov.
how about I just take the line out and just say that you introduced the youth and family budget and the increase was.
Let's stop. Yeah, let's stop.
Okay.
Okay.
Perfect. Yep.
All right, now, then I want you to put the word proposed after so again, line 188 at the end of it, say the budget has a proposed year-over-year
Okay.
increase. Okay,
Got it.
all right. All right, I'm almost done. Line 210.
Hang on.
So
Yeah.
appointment period, interface and the client interact. So you need a word in between client and together. They interact together.
Okay.
Okay. You can also say interface together, but that's too many interfaces. So just say interact. Okay. And then line 253, Claire, the very last word, you need to say reserve fund. So if a reserve fund request is required, you just say if a fund transfer or fund request. So reserve fund.
Got it.
Okay. 2 more. Line 267. So it starts off with the word virus. So virus, the vacancy rate is expected to be, so you need the word be.
Oh, yep.
Okay. All right, next page. Line 314. Casey updated that OneDrive folder is set up and all members should have received an email from Tom McLean. Not a memo, it's an email. That's it. But those are all just nitpicks. So you did a great job on this.
Hey, Kathy, just for these current minutes, John Rooney texted me. He dropped while you were going through your minutes at 8:38. So just so you have that.
Did you hear that, Claire? He's got to go back to the hospital. So John Rooney has left at 8:33. Okay, so assuming that's it for edits, anyone will make a motion to accept the minutes as edited?
So moved.
A second.
Okay, so I heard 2 seconds. I heard Judy. Who was the other person?
It was me. Just take Judy.
All right, so Judy seconded Claire. All right,
Okay.
roll call. Judy,
Aye.
Cook, aye. Andrew D,
Aye.
Jason,
Aye.
Tim,
Got to unmute.
Sorry about that. Aye.
Andrew P.
Aye.
Okay, so 6-0 for the minutes. All right, moving on. Chairman's update is of one. Oh, I did it. So Andrew, did you hear what I said? The IT person is in the process of being hired. Okay, no news yet. They've got 5 resumes. Okay, Board of Health. So picking up where we left off, since we talked last week, the nurses quit, as we thought might happen. So Emily's resigned. So they have 2 new per diem nurses that have agreed to work some. So now they've got 3 per diem nurses that have agreed to give some hours. The problem appears to be that they haven't agreed to give a specific amount of hours, so they pitch in when they can. The vast majority of their time is spent once we have a case that's been identified in Southborough as doing contact tracing. So there's a system in the state of Massachusetts called Maven that sends to the town any COVID positive cases, and then we take it from there. So that's where they're spending most of the time, is doing the contact tracing. So I don't know what Emily's last day is, but I imagine it's soon. So as we suspected, and as Mary Lou intimated, she's afraid that we're going to be without a board and employees soon if something's not done. Okay, since we talked, I have talked to Marty Healy and Mark Purple and Betsy Rosenblum. What everybody agreed might be a good plan for advisory to consider is the following. There's really nothing to be done right now. The only role we have is to possibly use a portion of the reserve fund to fund any expenses that they incur from 1/1/21 to 6/30 that won't be reimbursed by some other means. But since we don't know what that number might be, we don't know what the reimbursement is, there's really not a lot for us to do right now, but we very well may be asked at the end of the fiscal year to at least fund possibly some per diem hours for these nurses if they don't get new funding from the federal government, the state government, whatever. So that is kind of where we stand. Talking about trying to regionalize is a longer term discussion. I think it's worthwhile to do. I actually think we should talk about it. You heard Paul Pazinski, who seemed to be in favor of at least some roles being regionalized, but that's not for us tonight to really discuss. It's going to take a while to get that piece of it done. So that's about all I have to say on that, other than personnel did meet today to talk about the positions that are being requested for 7/1/21. They did not vote, they just listened. So they haven't decided whether they're in favor of adding a full-time director and a full-time nurse. The admin issue should not be an issue. The person who is currently the admin for the Board of Health is also an admin for the assessor's office. She works 24 hours for the assessor and 16 for Board of Health. Paul Sabelli has agreed to let her work as much as she needs to for Board of Health. And that's been going on for a while, and it's going to continue until at least February, where she may need to be pulled back to the assessor's office to help out with some of the things they do around that time. But for now, basically, she is full-time. On top of that, Mark Purple is going to work with Board of Health to get them more admin time if they need it. Given again, we've got people who aren't necessarily working full-time because of COVID. We got the library closed for a whole week. So Mark is confident he will be able to supply them with what they need as far as an admin. Third, I had never heard of this before. I'm sure Jason knows what it is, but there is a group called CERT, Community Emergency Response Team in Southborough that is basically just what it says. It's designed to deal with emergencies. Chief Achilles is on it. I think Lisa Bracio's on it. So it's a group of volunteers from the town that have agreed to basically work when there's an emergency and tell the town what to do. So CERT is also apparently going to help out as far as any hours that are needed by Board of Health to at least do the contact tracing. Now, obviously, Lisa's not going to give people vaccines, so you still need a nurse to do that. And I forwarded to you guys 2 emails from today from Mary Lou, where she's made the statement that she doesn't think we're going to be able to do vaccines here, which I hope is not the case, but she did make the statement. So that's still to be discussed as far as having the ability to do that. But obviously without a nurse, we won't be doing vaccines. So anyway, it's still a problem. We've got 2 people on the board that clearly are not going to re-up soon. So they're going to be gone soon. And you've got 1 employee who's left. And I believe that they're worried about the other employees too.
So Kathy, is there are we voting on anything tonight? Because they did submit a request for reserve.
So Jason, we are losing you. If you can hear me, you are frozen. So I think I know what you're saying there. So I'll keep going, assuming you can hear me. Because we don't know whether the reserve fund is going to need to be used, there's nothing to vote on tonight. We've been told that we might be asked to do this. Board of Health has been told that advisories reserve fund could be used for any additional costs that are incurred that aren't reimbursed. So I don't know what we would vote on. We don't know the amount. We don't know that it's going to happen. We basically are on notice that this might come back at the end of the year.
But I think we need to be clear, because I think Mary Lou said it very specifically last week. There are certain items they were looking to do in the short term that were non-COVID related, but were more strategic in nature. I'm not in favor of ever using reserve fund for building the department moving forward. I do think we need to have that conversation. I think it's a worthwhile conversation, but I don't think that's an appropriate use of reserve fund. The public health nurse, and whether you go full-time contract, whether you add some more per diems, that I would support. But I also have had a bunch of conversations, one with Mark and one with the chief, actually a few with Mark, because I think I was pretty, I don't like creating issues without coming up with solutions, is my general way of dealing with things. And
why don't you bring Mark in? He's here.
Yeah. There he is. Mark is in. But I think I like the leadership that's starting, to come about here. And I think the one thing that you didn't mention in the opening is, in addition to CERT, we do have paramedics, 21 of which I think almost all of them are paramedics that work in the fire department full time. And there's definitely discussion at the state level of what level of certification is going to be required to administer the vaccine. So I would strongly encourage us, I was on the personnel board for obviously our advisory topic today. I'm not going to go over that tonight, but I listened after and I was very troubled. And I think advisory needs to be aware of this as we consider this, is the Board of Health chair specifically said that she is not authorizing a submission for the vaccine. There's paperwork, I believe it was drafted in most part, and Mark can correct me if I'm wrong, by the fire department. But ultimately the Board of Health has to sign it because she's not confident in our ability to execute. Well, I hear the issues with the Board of Health, and I'm skeptical that we're actually gonna be able to find nurses at this point. Even if we authorized it, right? So even if we authorize it, we still have to source it. So what I would strongly encourage is that and I'm happy to help in any way, and I've echoed this to Mark and the chief, but anyone else that wants to help, figure out a way to collaborate and find a solution for the town, but also not make a knee-jerk reaction to, I don't want to call it a threat, but it came across that way to me, and I was, I think we need to help steer this ship down the right passage, because I think there's a lot of residents that are relying upon, a lot of us to execute.
Andrew?
Yeah. So, Jason, I agree with what you said, and a really good point you raised at the last meeting that I've been thinking about a lot and helps me to understand this. It's just really basically, the very important task like distributing vaccines, contact tracing. I could benefit from a basic understanding of what level of government is really, coordinating? Because I think you asked the question, is it really the case that when a vaccine comes, that the federal government or the state government is going to leave it to individual municipalities to raise the funds and coordinate all the staffing of something this enormously important? Or wouldn't there be some guidance from the state, the federal government, and then we follow what that guidance is, with the idea that probably there's going to be some funding attached to that?
Well, let's make it clear as to what happened. If you remember when Mary Lou was in front of us a week ago, she did not make the statement we're referring to. In fact, she implied that the paperwork was either in process or had been submitted. I have to go back and listen to what you said exactly as far as making sure Southborough got its allocation of vaccines. She did not say to us a week ago that she wasn't going to sign that paperwork.
But Kathy, I'm talking about a discussion that happened today.
I know. And then the email I forwarded you said, she absolutely says this in the email too, Jason, the one that I forwarded you. So I agree, it happened. So my point is, it happened in the week that we're talking about as far as that change in mindset. And I also agree with Andrew D. I think we've got to make sure that we get our share of the vaccine here to take care of the people that count on, the senior center to run a vaccination clinic, whatever. So I agree that we need to make sure this is done one way or another. I don't want a knee-jerk reaction either. We don't have the ability to fund a full-time health director, nor do we have the ability to fund a full-time nurse because they're not on the SAP. Now, Mary Lou has done a whole lot of work trying to understand legally where the Board of Health stands as far as what they can do on their own without anybody else involved. And they believe tonight that they can contract for a part-time director, another part-time nurse. So they believe they've got the ability to do it. They just can't fund it. So it's one thing to be able to sign the contract. You've got to have the money to do with it. So what advisory will be relied on, if anything, is to fund these short-term needs. We haven't talked about their budget for 7/1/22. We're going to do that toward the very end. I've got that scheduled toward the last so we can have as much information as possible. So we aren't opining at this point on whether we believe 7/1/22 or 7/1/21 they should change their budget or increase their budget from 171,000 to 394,000 in one fell swoop. And that's what they're asking for. So that's not what we're dealing with. Nor do I'm repeating what Jason's saying. I don't think we should do anything that would basically lock us into that as far as any decision goes. But it's clear they definitely do they do have a short-term problem. The per diem nurse that they've had up till now apparently hasn't been able to contribute very much, according to Mark. I think he's more optimistic that the two that are about to come on board, I think one like right now and one maybe in a week or so, he's more optimistic about those two, but he also didn't know till today that Emily had resigned. So that was new news too. So, this is a fast moving thing as far as what's going on. So let me be quiet for a moment and let Mark have a chance to weigh in here.
Well, thank you, Kathy, but there's not a whole lot much, that I can add to this after what you've said and what Jason said. But if I understand correctly, let me be clear. Emily hasn't resigned yet. The indication is that she is, she will be resigning. So there's been no notification, of officially of that happening. We've just been made aware that it appears that that's imminent from Mary Lou. I've gone back and forth with Mary Lou a little bit. I think that I think that this pandemic has kind of exposed, some of the the fragility of the way that the Board of Health staffing is currently put together. I don't know if that would have happened regardless of the pandemic or not. But I think, I'm trying to bring people together so that we can figure out, what we need to do in order to properly staff the department to be able to respond the way we need to with the pandemic. And then what we need to do
to provide a sustainable staffing level moving forward for everyday needs, with the ability to be flexible when things like this happen. I don't know that those two items need to be done at the same time. They could be exclusive of each other. But to Jason's point, in terms of the pandemic response, as well as vaccine distribution, I know that Emily has been working with Chief Achilles. I spoke with the chief today. They have been helping with the application that needs to be made to the state on Southborough's distribution plan. Mary Lou has agreed, that to try and, get Board of Health, Fire Department, myself, and maybe a few other people to the table just to see how we can get this done so that everybody is in agreement as to how we move forward. Because, like I said, I heard it at your meeting, and I also heard it today at Personnel Board that, essentially if we can't fill these positions and can't, do the staffing the way that is being proposed by the Board of Health, then Southborough will receive no vaccine. And I maybe that wasn't the way the message was intended to come out, but it's kind of come out the same way twice. So I just think we need to change that messaging so that, we don't create, an issue unnecessarily that we have to try and walk ourselves back from.
Well, if we don't apply for the vaccine, then we won't get it. So it seems to me you go ahead and do the paperwork you need to do. And then, because if you don't ask for it, you're not going to get it. So it's going to be a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Right. Well, and it's not applying for the vaccine. It's basically submitting your plan to the state for vaccine distribution. How are you going to manage that? And speaking with Chief Achilles, the plan is something that can be put together, but I do not think that it can be submitted without the Board of Health. And so, again, trying to bring everybody to the table, doing that sometime within the next week, and trying to establish a path forward so that we can make sure that we have, we have what we need to be able to provide the residents, vaccine when it does become available.
So you're going to continue to basically chair this process to make sure that that application does go in?
Chair Shepherd. Yeah, I'm trying to, like I said, I'm just trying to make sure that, we can get everyone on the same page so that we can get something submitted. Yes.
So what I told Mark and Marty, just again, to try to make sure there's not, we got too many cooks in this kitchen, is that all I would do with Mary Lou is let her know that advisory will contemplate a reserve fund transfer at the appropriate time. But that's about all we can do as far as their short-term need. And Mark and Marty seem to agree with that when we talked.
But I think we need to put parameters around that, because I think we've solved the admin question from last week, right? If we go back to the memo they submitted to us. And I think there's a distinct difference, at least in my opinion, is I would vote in support of helping on nursing if you didn't get backfill money from the state or the feds. I'm not sure I'm in favor of going to a full-time public health director, because that's a far more far-reaching position to deal with septic, all the other stuff that the Board of Health deals with. I don't think that that's a reserve fund transfer type item to change a position in the middle of the year. So I just think we need to be clear with we'll contemplate at the end of the year, depending on the majority of the committee.
Right. So I think I've made it clear, Jason, that we are not offering to fund a full-time director and or a full-time nurse. What we're offering to do is help out with the per diem nurses that they believe they can hire if there's no other funding for it. But they do believe they've got the legal authority to contract for a new director to support Paul and a full-time nurse. But they have no ability to pay for that. So I agree that it needs to be very clear. I mean, advisory, that would eat up probably almost all the reserve fund anyway. So I agree. We need to make it clear that what we're willing to consider is helping to fund per diem nurses. I think we need to be clear. We got the admin position covered. We're not supporting hiring a new director, but we are supporting helping them with the nurse piece of it, especially to make sure they've got people that can give the vaccine when it gets here.
So I think we need to, I would recommend we vote on that so it's very crystal clear on what we are supporting or not, as opposed to a side conversation.
And I would clarify it less as per diem as more contractor or temp, even temp to perm.
Temp might be the better adjective too, Andrew. That
But non-benefit, non-employees, but temporary costs due to the influx of work due to COVID.
Okay, so you can make the motion then.
Oh, great. I guess move that the advisory committee will instruct the Board of Health that our opinion is that we would be supportive of additional costs for temporary contract workers to facilitate issues due to the COVID crisis.
Do you want to limit it to nurses? Because with your motion, they can do
I think if they need somebody supervising the nurses in this time, I don't personally have an issue with that if that's what they think they need, as long as we're not on the hook for benefits and I mean the per diem rate and what they were looking at for the full time isn't that much difference. It's maybe another $5 an hour.
Okay, anyone have a problem with the motion before I restate it? Tim, you're okay?
Well, I have a bit of a problem if, just in general, if they choose not to pursue the COVID vaccine. So I at this point, I'm not comfortable leaving it open-ended if games are being played in this arena.
Well, I think Mark said he's actively working on that, right?
I mean,
And I would like to see that resolved as a first step myself before promising any sort of funding whatsoever. I was more than a little taken aback when I read that tonight. We're probably the only town in Massachusetts where the Board of Health has explicitly chosen not to pursue the vaccine.
So does anyone want to wait till next week to vote on this? Do we want to vote tonight? And do we want to do we want to amend Andrew's motion to make it clear that the funding, reserve fund will be available only if the additional cost is incurred to basically, at least in part, administer the vaccine?
I think we should vote on that.
That works for me.
Okay, all right. Okay, Andrew, you want to try again to make sure Claire gets this and maybe truncate a little bit, but add to it the fact that we do expect them to use part of the money to administer the vaccine.
Thank you.
Sure, I'll give it another shot. I move that the advisory committee votes to communicate to the Board of Health that we would be look favorably on additional or reserve fund transfers for additional Board of Health resources for that are, and we can edit this later, that are temporary or contractor in nature, not full-time, not benefited employees, that would also facilitate a COVID vaccine within the town, administered by the local health department. Anything else I'm missing?
I think that's good. Claire, you can of course listen to it again, but no, I think you got it there. I like that one better than the first one. Anybody disagree with he captured it all? Okay.
Well, I think we need to second it, but I just want to add one thing for discussion. So I'll second it for purposes of discussion.
Okay.
I think we need to have somewhere, and I'm okay if it's in the minutes. I'm not going to ask Andrew to try to do it, but I think it needs to be contingent upon the Board of Health working with the town administrator and all other interested parties on submitting this application. We would then advance to the funding stage. But without that application, I'm kind of where Tim was. I'm not entertaining any of this if we're going to leave people in the dark that desperately need this.
Okay, so we can leave the motion as it stands. I think everything's still in there. We can add what you just said to the minutes to basically embolden the vote we're about to take, to make it clear what we voted on and what our intention is here.
Yeah. And we're not saying as part of the motion that we have voted. We will look favorably.
Is that okay, Jason?
I'm good with that.
Okay. All right, so we've got the motion. Jason seconded. We discussed. So roll call vote. Judy?
Okay, Bud's aye.
Cook, aye. Andrew D?
Aye.
Jason?
Aye.
Tim?
Aye.
Andrew? Pete?
Aye.
Okay, so 6-0, Claire. And then just make sure you very carefully listen to the latter part from Jason as far as using that to amplify what we voted on. And then I will very carefully
Got
relate
it.
this to Mary Lou. Okay. Okay, any further discussion on Board of Health?
No, although I did find something that says paramedics could administer the vaccine.
Yeah, I mean, why not, right? But, so let's leave that to Mark and Cert to figure that piece of it out, but it does sound like that.
Just, I understand we're going to move on. We're
It's okay, this is important, so go ahead.
But I still feel like, you know, the question I asked tonight and the question I think I asked the same question in the last meeting, I don't have a clear answer to it, and maybe that there isn't a clear answer, but just understanding so it is the case that the vaccine is going to be distributed in some coordinated fashion, and that each individual town Board of Health makes individual applications to actually get the vaccine, like that.
I assume, Mark, correct me if I'm wrong, that the application explains to the state how they're going to administer the vaccine, you know, where they're going to do it, who's going to do it, all the details. So the state is comforted that it's going to be administered properly and carefully. So I would think that would be the main gist of the application, telling the state how we're going to do this. And Mark is not saying I'm wrong, so I assume he agrees.
Oh,
with
you're
that.
right, Kathy.
Okay.
That's accurate.
So anything else?
I assume that this is in conjunction with physicians' offices, local ERs.
Well, you know, Mary Lou I don't remember what she said last time. She goes, your physician offices aren't going to have the vaccine. So I think she implied it's going to be, you know, CVS, Walgreens, like probably a lot of people do their flu shots, although my doctor does flu shots. So she said doctors won't get this vaccine is what she said.
There's a pretty good diagram that Governor Baker released today of how it's going to be ordered, who's going to get it. Like even like first responders have to go to a hospital. They're not going to like show up at.
Can you send that? Can you forward that?
Yeah, let me find it. It's like all over the news. I'll find it and send it to them.
There's some good articles, and they have a pretty good COVID-19 vaccine FAQ, and that's where I saw the paramedic thing. But it's basically saying it's going to be healthcare institutions, hospitals, community health centers, private medical office will have the vaccine, pharmacies, including like CVS, Costco, Walgreens, Walmart, and then vaccine will also be made available to local health departments. So that's what we're talking about here.
What are you reading? What's that from?
I will send the link to everybody, but it's just from the FAQs for the Massachusetts
Department of Health,
mass.gov, something.
Okay.
So Judy, he's going to send us a link so we
Yeah,
can.
all right.
Okay, I'm going to move on to the next item, which is an overall budget discussion as far as where we are with fiscal year 22, which is not in a very good shape. So The other morning, the town finance committee met to talk about the overall budget, and the schools are part of that. So Greg Martineau and Becky Pellegrino were there. Right now we've got placeholders for the schools, but they did update us on at least what their budgets look like currently. And Jason was there too. They updated us on where their budgets stand right now. Algonquin's right now is 7%, more than 7% year over year. And K through 8 is about 4% year over year was what they've got right now. That's their rough budgets. Things will probably change by the time we see it, but it's, they're not in a good place. Their issue is, and it always is, the cost of special education. They've ended up at Algonquin with 2 outplacements for the middle of the year that aren't in the budget for fiscal year 21 either, that will carry over to fiscal year 22. Those are very expensive. They have applied for some relief, but they don't know that they're going to get it as far as fiscal year 21. So they might actually have a fiscal year 21 problem also. They don't know yet. If you were to add what they told us on Monday or Tuesday to what we've got right now as far as Brian's Excel workbook, it would change year over year for residential tax increases to about 9.1%. So definitely going the wrong way. On top of that, one thing that I'm more worried about this budget than any I've had in the last few years. I thought we knew ways to get it down, but when you hear things like from Chief Paulus that it's baked into the union contracts, what's he going to do? Lay a person off that we just hired. So I am worried about this year. Obviously, the capital is almost double from last year because we delayed so much stuff. But the other thing too that I'm worried about, and I'm waiting for Possibility to answer an email I sent him today. Remember, this projected year-over-year increase for residential properties that we show the town at town meeting, or we tell the town about, is only estimated, and it's estimated assuming that the split between commercial property and residential stays the same year to year, as far as the percent each class has to the total valuation. So the valuation for the budget year ending 22 is going to be based on values as of 1/1/21. And I am really worried that the commercial valuations are going to drop significantly because of the virus. So I'm sitting right now at 132 Turnpike Road. Next to me is 118 and 120 Turnpike Road. Dave Ferris bought those buildings over the summer for $3.5 million, and they're assessed at $16 million. I just think that you're going to have the big landlords apply for big abatements. I think Bill DiPietro will go in. Building I'm in is 2/3 empty. So I'm worried that not only do we have a big increase in gross costs, that the split is going to be unfavorable to residential, the residential side of it. So that's going to increase it too. So I think we've got our work cut out for us next couple of months. One little bit of good news is the split between Northborough and Southborough for Algonquin is fixed. They always fix that with the October enrollment, and that has again gone in our favor. It's not moved much, but it's moved a little bit. So it's gone from 63.27 to, gone from 62.28 to 63.27. So Southborough's share of Algonquin continues to go down. So that will help a little bit, but probably not a whole lot. So that's kind of the pessimistic view of where the budget stands right now. So Mark, feel free to add anything that you think is relevant to that.
No, I thought that was a pretty good assessment, Kathy. I think the one thing I would just is worth repeating is, it seems every year we start out with a budget that, is sitting at like a 7-8% increase. And there usually are areas that we can cut down. There usually are areas that we can trim to bring things down into the, 2.5, 3.5 range. And those things are not, they don't easily exist in this budget. I think capital is one of those pieces. I think, you take a look at police budget. Police is probably the easiest one to look at. You add more full-time people, then you probably can cut some overtime. that would be a logical thought process. But, overtime is used to help cover, the training expenses for people when they, you've got to cover the shifts when people go on training, and then when they attend training off shift. So there's no easy answers. I think it could be a difficult budget season, because I think that the answers on how to get the budget down are difficult, and it's going to mean more than just doing tweaks to individual budgets. I think it's going to mean some real, hard looks about how we can reshape, some of what we do, how we do, and who we do it with.
Well,
Kathy, are we actually going to review the Board of Health budget? I don't think that was one of on our
We
list.
are. No, we are. So if you look at the list I sent out, I don't know, a week or so ago, you're going to see them on there. So we are.
Okay.
In fact, Tim Martell is looking at that budget. So that's why Tim's. So we are. But I did put it toward the end just because of everything going on, to make sure we've got as much time as possible to consider what they're asking.
I'm sorry, Kathy, I'm looking at what?
Do you know you've got the Board of Health assigned to you too, besides IT?
I did not know that.
Okay, well now you do.
Okay.
Okay, so I sent an email, I don't know, a week ago with the list that goes all the way through the end of January attached to it. And I didn't think that anybody was assigned, but then I went back and I looked at my list and I had your name next to it, so I just put it back on there.
Kathy,
But-
we need any more movement on the benefits?
No,
That's
and
another big whammy.
yeah, and I think we're going to have to really see if there's something we can do there, work with Brian on that one. So Mark, just so you know, Andrew took a look at Ashland, your former employer. And it looks like the cost of their plans are a lot less than ours. They've got more than we do, more choices. But we were hoping that maybe if we could do a real good scrub on that, maybe there's a way to save some money there.
So Ashland, unless they've changed how they're doing things, they were part of a health consortium, and they've been in that for a number of years. So I think that there is some benefit rate-wise for them doing that. But you've also paid into the consortium. And so, they've gotten benefits over a number of years. We had taken a look at potentially, when I came here to see about joining that consortium. However, the buy-in cost now, because we would be newly investing, made the cost really exorbitant to become a part of. So I haven't taken a look at it in, going on 9 years or so now. So I can't say what they may or may not be doing with their rates, but from last I remember it, that may be why, their rates appear to be fairly low.
So it's still probably worthwhile seeing if there's anything there, but the schools still drive this budget. So, our hopes really are dependent on the schools coming up with something that will reduce that 4% for K through 8 down to, maybe high 2s. See, the problem there is, just like with John Parent, the schools, when they cut their budget last year, they cut it a lot when we did the exercise. And so Greg is now using the word that he deferred some things to fiscal year 22. So they may not be able to. And then, if you're required to do the out-of-district placement, you're required to do it. The circuit breaker money we get does offset some of it, but not all of it. So this is maybe a year that we really have run out of, I won't say tricks, but ways to get this budget down. So we'll help start to look at fiscal year 23 too, to see if we think this is going to repeat. So doing things like seeing what chief policy looks like for salaries will help. So anything else as far as fiscal year 22 overall?
Kathy, when is the schools going to get loaded into ClearGov?
He told us, Jason, did we meet Monday or Tuesday?
That
I
was
guess Monday.
Tuesday. It seems like it was 2 years ago.
Yeah. I do so many meetings, I can't keep up with them. Okay, so we met Tuesday morning. He said basically January, but I don't think it's going to be early January. They're working on it, but there's still a lot to do to get it to the point where they're ready to, they think, vote on it. So it'll be the last one, it's the biggest by far, and it'll be the last one that we'll get to look at. And it always is. This is nothing unusual. Okay. Next item is the continued discussion of the proposed changes to the advisory bylaw. I don't think anyone, I had thought I sent everybody John Butler's email, but I didn't until today. I realized it. So you've only recently received John Butler's email, which is more thoughts on the proposed changes. So I don't want to do this tonight. I'm going to move this to next week, but we really do need to get it resolved to give you a chance to read his additional thoughts. And if you wonder why I'm focused so much on what John thinks, I do want his buy-in so that at town meeting he supports this. I don't want to propose this and then John and or Al Hamilton stand up and make a really convincing case why the town should vote against it. I want what we want to do to pass. Read what he said, absorb what he says, and then we'll talk about it again at the next meeting.
But Kathy, we have a placeholder for this all set, right?
We do. So it's all set as far as the 12/15 warrant closure. Okay, so you will hear soon from the subcommittee work as far as the schools go, but nothing new at the moment. But that's coming closer and closer to having some real news. So you'll hear more about that at a later meeting. Calendar is we meet next week and then we're off for 2 weeks and then we come back in January and meet all 4 Wednesdays in January. And you should have those on your calendar. I've set up all of those. So any other matters properly brought forth from you guys?
Kathy, I'll just say I appeared at Personnel Board, but because it's not on the agenda, I'd like to update the committee on that discussion next week on the vacation and sick time.
Okay, so will you make sure I get that on the agenda? Remind me.
And Jason, I did see that in the chief's budget, vacation buyout, which wasn't in last year's budget. So I don't know if that.
I believe it's in Board of Selectmen budget too for Mark.
Okay.
Yeah, the chief had like $3,000 for vacation buyback.
And going forward, if there's a topic that any one of you wants to discuss at an advisory meeting, let me know ahead of time what it is. Jim Haggerty sent out an email basically reminding us to be careful and be as detailed as possible as far as agendas, and specifically said under the chair report, put what you're going to talk about. So I did amend the agenda today to add the one thing I talked about. So if you've got something specifically you want to talk about, let me know and I will put it there. That we have told the public exactly what we're going to talk about. All right. Any public comment from our public? All right. Seeing none. Can I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Judy seconded. Roll call vote. Judy?
Bud's eye.
Book aye. Andrew D?
Aye.
Jason?
Aye.
Tim?
Aye.
Andrew P?
Aye.
Thank you guys. Long meeting.